successfully passed the California High School Proficiency Examination and would like to attend community college. Under Student Matters, the governing board voted 5-0 to exempt Half Moon Bay High School student B from compulsory attendance. This student has successfully passed the California High School Proficiency Exam and would like to pursue his career in music production. Do we have Caroline online to lead our Pledge of Allegiance? Yes, we do.
I'm here. I pledge allegiance
to
to
the
the
flag
Flag
of
of the United States of America and
to
to
the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under God, indivisible, with
with
liberty and justice for all.
Can I just make an announcement really quick about interpretation?
Yes.
In Spanish. Buenas noches, este es un aviso para las personas que nos están escuchando en español. Tenemos interpretación disponible. Josefina nos está ayudando hoy a interpretar. En su pantalla, en las opciones que ustedes tienen abajo, aparece un icono que es como un mundito. Ahí en ese mundito presiónele y le va a dar las opciones de los lenguajes disponibles. Seleccione el de español y la interpretación, usted va a estar escuchando la interpretación en español. Le pedimos que mantengan la opción de manita arriba para que nosotros sepamos que alguien nos está escuchando en español. Gracias.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is approval of our agenda. Do I have a motion to approve our agenda as written?
So moved.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Do I have a second?
second.
Thank you, Sophia. Aye. Freya?
Aye.
Sophia?
Aye.
Lizette?
Aye.
Mary Beth?
Aye.
Caroline?
Aye.
Motion passes 5+1. Next on our agenda are communications, and we have a few public comments tonight. First up is Brianna LaFontaine. Is Brianna logged on yet?
Okay. Hi, I got the button to unmute.
Thanks.
Good evening, school board member, superintendent, and district office staff. My name is Brianna LaFontaine, and I'm a parent to two at El Granada Elementary School. I'm exhausted. I cannot believe our district is still at impasse. When trying to figure out what to say tonight, thoughts of doubt kept floating in. One is, as a parent leader, I hear a lot about making sure to stay in my lane. And as I thought through this doubt, I remembered I was a Measure I lead, bringing $1.6 million into the district annually for the next 10 years. I was on the Financial Advisory Committee, getting in-depth knowledge of our financial workings. And probably, most importantly, I am a CUSD parent, so teachers have direct impact on my children daily. The second seed of doubt was if you were still listening, or if I've become a broken record. But I was reminded of a quote by the most honorable Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg: "Fight for the things you care about." And in no way has my passion for our teachers waned. So here I am. I do know that the second half of that quote is, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. I can't comment on how that's going, but I will continue to be respectful, fair, honest, and consistent. A couple weeks ago, my daughter shut down during her Zoom class. I could not get her to change course. She was done, so then I was too. I had no idea what to do. I thought about how if she was in class, she would be a person, a little body where others would see her feelings, and how her teacher could step in like they know how. Then I realized this probably wouldn't have happened because in person, she wouldn't be alone. She would be surrounded by engaged peers and a teacher who could step in and pep her up. The class was over and I was in tears, feeling completely defeated. Then my phone rang and it was my daughter's teacher asking if she would like a one-on-one to talk about what was going on. She saw my daughter, even though my daughter's tiny face is 1 in 24 squares on a computer screen. Her teacher saw her just like if she was a full-body person in class. This teacher knew how to handle my child a month into virtual environment. This is one story, and I know there are 1,000 more. Our teachers deserve better. They deserve to be formally recognized. They deserve a raise. I am excited to start back with the Budget Advisory Committee this month and be more involved in this solution. But it would be really amazing if this got resolved even sooner so I can spend my time focusing on state funding advocacy, which could lead us to not be in this position in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. Next is Abby Foster.
Hello. I don't think you guys can see me, is that right? Okay, well, hi, it's very nice to see you all. Thank you to the school board and to the district for providing me this opportunity to speak. For those who don't know me, I teach first grade in the two-way immersion program at Hatch. This is my 25th year in the district. Needless to say, I've never experienced anything quite like what I'm doing now. I spent last spring and all summer relearning my career and preparing myself for remote teaching. School began 8 weeks ago, and I'm very happy to report that it is going very well. I appreciate the district's efforts to keep students and staff safe by remaining online as cases of COVID-19 continue to rise here on the coast. I also appreciate the district's efforts to provide us with the necessary tools and curriculum to do our jobs during this unprecedented time. Of course, we've hit some bumps in the road and not everything has worked according to plan, but we've adapted and we're constantly improving, and I am happy to report that my students are thriving. The bad news is that while I've always worked many hours above the 40 hours per week that I'm paid to work, since August, I've been working 60 to 80 hours per week. It's impossible to do my job without that. So the story that Brianna just told, that doesn't happen without putting in the extra hours. Because in addition to the time that we're live Zooming, we're preparing lessons and working behind the scenes, attending staff development, and just working out all those little quirks, answering texts, answering emails. I'm getting texts from parents at 10, 11 o'clock at night because they're having trouble with something. And I'm answering them because that's what I do. But it's really disheartening because I'm working this, and on top of what I'm doing for my job, I have to work a second job. I'm in my 25th year of teaching. I can't believe I have to work a second job just to pay the bills. It's mind-boggling to me. And I'm at the top of the pay scale. So if I'm struggling at the top of the pay scale, I don't know how anyone else is even surviving. I live month to month. I eat rice and beans. I don't go out. I can barely get gas in my car. And I just can't believe that the district doesn't prioritize us. And I know that the district is not a rich district, but you guys make the decisions on how to spend the money that you do have, and you need to prioritize us. We are stepping up and doing our job in a really good way here, and we deserve better. Please find a way to look in that budget and figure out what else you need to do to give us the raise that we deserve. We can't do this. Do you know how many of us are going to be looking for other jobs next year if we can't come to agreement here? We have to have a fair contract. Please, please do what you need to do so we don't have to leave this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. The next comment is a write-in from Lisa Zanetta. Board members, I serve on the Facilities Bond Measures MS&L Parcel Tax Measure I Oversight Committee. First, committee members were not made aware of the board resolution to consolidate committees until it was done. I find it odd and a bit unprofessional. I thought you should know. Second, I have great concern as a community member of how these bond funds are being spent. The community is expecting 2 elementary schools to be rebuilt to today's standard with the facility bonds that were passed. The district has been spending these funds down at a concerning rate. Although I do believe energy reducing initiatives are important, this investment is tapping into a budget that is already very modest. We are learning of a pricey tree mitigation project, aesthetic landscaping projects, new roofing needs, school surveillance systems, and a high school facility assessment, among other items in the works. All of this coming before site plan revisions for the elementary schools. My question to all of you, are you all paying close attention to projected rebuild budgets for the 2 elementary sites as a priority when approving these other initiatives? I certainly hope so. I'm looking forward to reaching out personally to you and administration to learn more. Thank you, Lisa, for your writing comment. Do we have our CUTA representative speaking tonight?
Sean, you're muted.
Good evening, President Hines, Superintendent McFetridge, board members, district leadership. First things first, I would like to thank Connie Giebelhausen for her many years of service to Cabrillo Unified School District. Connie was a savior for so many teachers. So thank you, Connie, for that hard work. Secondly, on to an election. I urge all voters who are concerned about public education to vote yes on Proposition 15. Proposition 15 will not raise taxes, property taxes on individuals, will not raise property taxes on small businesses, and it will not raise property taxes for farms. It will raise more than $2 million for Cabrillo Unified School District. Please consider a yes vote on Proposition 15. Over the past 29 months of fruitless negotiations, it's been difficult, exhausting, frustrating, and so far unproductive, but not hopeless. In fact, I believe this process can still work and that a bargain can be struck that will accommodate both positions. I'm hopeful because in early August, the CUTA negotiating team sat down with the CUSD management team, and we were able to work on the Memorandum of Understanding for remote learning. We were able to make radical changes necessary to implement effective instruction in this new era, and we were able to do so quickly, efficiently, and effectively. How could these changes be made so quickly when our contract negotiations has been so unproductive? Why? How can this be? A few reasons. The first one, for the Memorandum of Understanding, both sides saw the urgency of this situation, and both sides understood that to make this work, compromise, giving ground, give and take would be necessary. That has not been the case with the contract negotiation. Secondly, the contract negotiation is about compensation, a paycheck. The Memorandum of Understanding for remote learning and soon hybrid learning, that is about health and safety, a pandemic. The pandemic discussion and the paycheck discussion are separate, compartmentalized, hermetically sealed. Never the twain shall meet. When I heard that some in the community may feel that the Cabrillo Unified Teachers Association is in some way conflating these two and suggesting the notion that in some way the negotiating team is using in-person instruction as a bargaining tool, I cry hogwash. And in fact, Superintendent McFetridge, I would ask that you affirm the following 3 statements in your address to the board in a few minutes. First of all, is it true that in the Memorandum of Understanding discussions, there has been no discussion of compensation? Isn't it true that these discussions led to drastic changes in a very speedy manner? Secondly, haven't we, Sean and Sean, kept open lines of communication necessary to implement the Memorandum of Understanding. In the past 2 months, I've talked to Dr. McFetridge before dinner and after dinner, at least 3 times. And isn't it true that so far, there has been no negotiation session to address hybrid learning? That is something that we have not discussed yet. Board members, district management, fellow educators, COSI community, but most importantly, students. Teachers are looking forward to in-person instruction. Working with you in our classrooms, eager learners, curious scientists, creative experimenters, careful creators, vigorous athletes, thoughtful historians, and number lovers. It is not only our calling to work with you in person, but it is our passion. When it is safe to return to in-person instruction, safe for students, safe for teachers, safe for support staff, your teachers will be there. We are looking forward to seeing you in our classrooms as soon as it is safely possible. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sean. Do we have a CSEA representative? I see Stig.
I don't see this here. Good evening. My name is Stig Lynn. I'm the CSA president. And I want to say hi to President Hines, board members, Superintendent McFetridge, administration, and staff who's working to do this tonight. So I want to first start with echo what the CUTA president Reardon said here about the Prop 15 is a very important thing that we all need to support. It's not going to affect us people who owns house in the city who is on the Prop 13. This is actually going to be a lot of extra money for school district and exactly what we are looking for, so we can do the changes in our district that we need, pay our staff, our teachers, and so we are in line with other districts around us. So a sad thing I want to say here is about Connie. We're going to miss you. You have been a rock behind the scenes here. Make sure that the teacher have been, when they've been out sick or something, we have coverage for them. She also have been amazing with staff and helped us out here. And she's going to be greatly missed and be hard to replace her. We also have Mayra Rodriguez, who is going to do other stuff. And our union are going to miss her too, because she has been a secretary of the TSCA, is a rock to have there in the background. And of course, Tino Torres, who have been in a district for 7 years, decided to go to another district. And there we were talking about here is also our district need to up the pay here, because we cannot continue to lose valuable people who is supportive to our students and staff in our district. That was pretty much what I have to say. And I know next week, I think it's the administrative week, and support our administrative staff too. And we also have coming up here an election. Make sure that you all are registered to vote. This election are important, both for our school, for our country and everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Board member reports. Sophia, would you like to go first tonight?
Sure. I'll just start off by saying to say this is a stressful time for our community, our country, and our world would obviously be a huge understatement. You know, the pandemic has added to our chronic challenges, yet it's made it even more important than ever to make sure we're taking care of ourselves, making sure we're taking care of each other and our students, so that we can continue to supporting those students and making sure that our decisions are based on evidence and context across all our roles as board members, administrators, teachers, staff, parents, big decisions, daily decisions that seem like they don't have an effect on anyone, but they do. And it's harder than ever to be able to do that with the calm and rationality that it will take when there's so much, frankly, it feels like there's a lot of, chaos out there with a lot of unknowns. I think humility is also important, and we'll need to understand that unconscious bias is just that, it's unconscious. So it's going to be important too that we make sure we watch out for that in ourselves on a continuous basis, and making sure we're open. And I'm really encouraged as I see, there's so many of our conversations about this distance learning, I don't say positive is not the right word, but how constructive folks have been looking at it in so many cases as, an opportunity to look at what we're doing and how we're doing it, and get some longer term learnings out of it. So I think that's really great. Also, in the honor of History Month, it happened to be, we had a really big achievement earlier since our last board meeting, which is kicking off our first ever Latinx Advisory Roundtable. So I'm really happy to support that with Lizette as our representatives from the board, with our Latino Latinx community members, supporting Leticia and Rosalva and coordinating across the various community members at Moonridge, Alas, different groups that work to support our community. So I'm really excited about that, because it's so critical more than ever that we work together and we honor those voices that historically haven't had a voice at the table. So it's really great. And I think what I think about a lot these days is just remembering why we're here, why we exist as a school community, as a district, as schools, just as all of us here together. And that, of course, is our students. And I just keep coming back to that and feeling like if we keep that in our mind, and that we all have that same goal and collaborate openly in how to achieve that goal, we're going to be able to achieve that goal and that broader mission of a better future for all of our kids. So, just want to say thanks to everybody for all the pulling together that's happening, and that's going to need to continue, especially over the next several months of uncertainties and challenges. It will make us stronger, and I'm really excited for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Mary Beth?
Sure, I'll go. I started a master's in governance, and I had my first class last week. And some of the things in the class struck a chord. And so I thought I might share a little bit of that tonight. So this class I took was about board members and how to be better and how to get better. And they started off, well, it didn't start off with this, but it had some statistics around some stuff that I want to talk about, and then a study that I found interesting that I wanted to share with fellow board members and also everyone else who's interested in education. So one of the things they talked about was that your normal board will usually talk about finance and facilities about 60% of the time, and they'll talk about student learning and achievement about 10% of the time. And they found they looked at also boards that they considered high achieving, and they found that ratio flipped. They found 60% of those high achieving boards' time was spent on talking about student learning and achievement, and then about 10% was spent on talking about facilities and finance. And I'm not saying any of this directly relates to us. I mean, I know we have been talking a lot about finance, but we've also been having big financial problems. But I found it interesting. The other thing that they pointed out was that an average, your normal school board would talk about community relations and advocacy about 5% of the time, and a high performing board would talk about that about 15% of the time. So I found that interesting. And then there was a study I read as part of it, and many of you in education might be familiar with it, but it's called the Lighthouse Study. And it was a study done from the Iowa School Boards Foundation. And basically what they looked at was school boards in high achieving versus low achieving districts, and what they're doing to have a positive impact on student achievement. So basically the study went over 12 years and it had various phases to it. But I want to walk through that study with you. a little bit just to give you an idea of it, because I found it pretty interesting. So in phase 1 of the study, they found that the school boards in these high achieving districts were significantly different in their beliefs and actions from school boards in low achieving districts. So based on that phase 1 finding, they took those findings and said, okay, let's find a low achieving district and give them structures and support them to see if we can help them become a high achieving district. So they took these pilot schools, they provided technical assistance and support to the board, the superintendent, district leadership. And I thought it was pretty interesting what they found. So when they started the pilot, they asked the participants, they said, describe what, your current goal for improvement. What are your improvement goals for the district? And they got answers like, to better educate the student for their lifetime, to prepare students for college, work, and life, to allow our students to be the best that they can be. And then they implemented their focused goal that they made for this district, which was reading comprehension K through 12 is the main improvement goal for our district. So in this pilot, reading comprehension was their big goal. And after a year, they went back and they asked the participants the same question. What are the improvement goals for your district? And then their answers were along these lines. Improve reading comprehension through the use of new instructional strategies to improve the reading comprehension at all grade levels, improve reading and reading comprehension of every student, to improve comprehension scores in reading in all content areas, so things like that. So it was a significant change in, thinking about the goals. They also went back and they said to the teachers, tell me about your PD, your professional development. And I'm just picking out a few quotes again. So at the beginning of the pilot, before it started, teachers were saying things like, they said, what has been your PD experience? And they were saying guest speaker on classroom discipline, technology updates on grading system, behavior management in the classroom, physical activity and nutrition, organizational skills, things along those lines. After the 1 year, they went back, asked them again. Here were a few of the answers. The review of student data and the research and development of strategies to meet the needs of students. I have received further training in instructional reading strategies. Researched how to improve reading comprehension in my subject area. Shared and discussed experience in implementing reading strategies. And then they also they also found that the board needed to be doing things to help along the way. And I pulled a few things out from that. I'm sorry if this is getting long, but I thought it was interesting. For the board, they said things like they needed to increase their use of data to set expectations, determine and monitor indicators of progress, and apply pressure for accountability. Another one was improving student achievement that would directly relate to the support for quality professional development, that we need to be behind having really quality professional development. And then the last one I'll say, which I think is really important, and it's about how broad we need to be on the board in our reach. Board members you need to connect to the community to increase the community's involvement in and commitment to the school district's focus for improvement. Board members need to value the role of the parents and community in the education of students and be willing to engage the community in a more significant role than the compliance requirements for involvement required by the state. And I think that's a big thing to get everyone on board for whatever that goal may be. In this case, it was reading comprehension, but really just reaching out and just making it a big deal. And I think it really hit me as being important because I know we're not at a stage right now where we're making decisions about, what we're going to be focusing on in the future, but we will be at some point. And I think it's always a good time to be thinking about that. But it hit me as important right now because we have pretty much a new administration at our school. We've had almost complete turnover now. And when I look at these people, I feel that they are committed to working with our teachers and staff in an effort of collaboration. And I feel like all of us are willing to try new ideas or techniques based on that research and data. So it makes me, when I read this study, it seemed impactful to me, and it made me hopeful for the future, because of what our staff already brings to the table and for what these new administrators are bringing. And I want us all to be thinking deeply about what our goals will be and how we're going to achieve them. So it just, I tried to bring a little something, because the class was pretty interesting, I thought. And I thought of everything that hit me, it was about thinking about what are we talking about at meetings, what are our goals and things like that. So I thought I'd bring that up, and it's the Lighthouse study if anyone's interested in looking at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Beth. Freya.
Hi, just want to say thank you again to all the teachers for all the hard work that you all are doing every day. I know that it's a new and unusual world, and it just seems to me that we've learned so much from last spring, and I really appreciate the hard work like that Abby was mentioning in terms of really having to relearn the job that you're doing, and Brianna's story about the teacher that reached out to her individual kid. And I just want to say thank you again from the bottom of my heart to our teachers, because they're just amazing, and I've really had that experience. I have a daughter who's a senior, and I just feel like I've been so blessed with so many wonderful teachers for her and for my other daughter who's now a sophomore. So I just want to say thank you, because I truly do value the work that you do, and I truly believe that you are not paid enough. And I want you all to know that in my heart, if there is money, I believe that that's a very valuable thing to honor you all in that way. So I just want to reiterate that again. I also just want to do a little word of, these are kind of reiterate what Sophia was saying. These are just hard times. So many people are going through so much, whether it's related to the pandemic or not, or COVID scares or other kinds of things. And I just think we all need to remember that and be gentle with one another. And so I guess my heart just goes out to all of those who are dealing with whatever family illness, other kinds of things, kids not being able to handle things, just all of the issues that come up in this time. So I just want to have us all remember that we are all going through those other things behind the scenes, some more obvious than others. And I just want to let you all know that my heart goes out to everyone for that. So, and then we are still, Zed and I and Sean are planning on getting together for our environmental committee. We've been a little bit hesitant on moving forward just because we don't want to add any extra burden, but we are excited, and there's already stuff, of course, going on, and some students have been in contact with us, and so we are excited about getting that moving and announcing some new steps in the future. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Freya. Lizette.
Hi, everybody. Good night. Good evening. I'm going to touch on the National Hispanic Heritage Month and how it's important to remember and acknowledge the large minority group that has become the largest minority group in the U.S. and in our small town of Half Moon Bay. We have helped make our country stronger and prosperous, and have made many contributions beyond description. In this great country and town, we have embodied the best of American values, such as family, faith, hard work, and access to rigorous education. We have made a remarkable mark on this country. There is great significance in the time span in which we celebrate and give tribute to these astonishing people. September 15th to October 15th celebrates the anniversary of independence of Latin American countries such as Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Chile, and my native Mexico. On October 12th, which is our upcoming holiday in the US, in Mexico, we celebrate El Día de la Raza, which is known as the Indigenous People Day. Our state of California was part of the Mexican cession in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. There is no doubt that during this time, Indigenous people stayed and adapted to this territorial cession from one state to another. I emphasize and dedicate a moment to all the parents who strive with pride and dignity and have children who compose more than half of the student population in Cabrillo. Now, we need to move on from an acknowledgement phase and be part of an action phase. Rich and robust curriculum needs to start to be put in place. Our kids need to know more about those roots and history, which inevitably is part of our current California history. What comes to mind right now as an example is the Day of the Dead and how we pay tribute in a respectful and almost joyous way to our loved ones who have departed. We have, we, although, we have Disney movies like Coco, and even though it's a great movie and everybody loved it, it doesn't do justice to what it really means and the roots behind El Dia de los Muertos with our Aztec roots and are also the meaning behind the celebration. um, I also, I think it's sad that we focus on holidays such as Cinco de Mayo, which is really an Americanized holiday that has been focused on Mexico, and in reality, it's not as important as it is in this country, which is kind of ironic. More than ever, with our current movement of Black Lives Matter, that it's important that teachers receive trainings and exercises that cover topics such as implicit biases. This is even more important, and not only one training. I really think that there should be several trainings and exercises on implicit bias. I know that it was part of the Super Tuesdays, if I'm not mistaken. Hopefully, that's being done and it's being received with open arms and open minds. This is even more important for the staff who have very little interaction with the at-risk students, since there is no secret that there is a high rate of Latinos who are labeled as special ed. All of these children deserve an opportunity and an equitable access to the same rigorous coursework as any other student in the district.
Thank you very much, Lizette. I just wanted to acknowledge that a theme that I hear from every other board member, and I think I am included in this, is that while we are in the pandemic right now, each of us has our eye on the future and the possibility, and very much want to lean into a better Cabrillo Unified School District in the future. And so while we are in this crazy pandemic space, I'm interested in working with Dr. Bhatia on the Visual and Performing Arts Committee that was to be a priority this year, but has been a little bit supplanted with the back to school. And I know so much work is going into just doing what we have to do because of COVID, doing what we have to do to make it safe for teachers to go back to school and our students to go back to school in a hybrid situation once it's safe. And you'll see on the, it was on the consent agenda, but we have the HVAC systems and ventilation. So there's so many pieces going on behind the scenes. I want to also thank the administration for all of the heavy lifting to make sure that it really will be safe once all of these decisions can be made. And I wanted to say thank you to Mr. Contreras for the office hours that he did via Zoom and going over the budget yet again. It's, I want to acknowledge the 68 participants in addition to the panelists here. Nominally, we don't have 60 plus people in the room during a board meeting. And so while it's really hard during COVID, the fact that we had this many people listening into the board meeting is a sign that our community cares and is passionate about the decisions that are made on behalf of our students and our teachers. And anyways, the Mr. Contreras being able to take the time to explain that it's not a budget just for 1 year, but it's a 3-year budget that has to be balanced. And earlier tonight, it was like shortly before this board meeting, I was getting questions from someone who happened to be at San Benito House around a fire pit and asking questions about the district. And I said, I'm happy to answer questions, share my phone number. I'll go into any details and point you to the right information so you understand the complete picture. This community cares. And I just want to say thank you to each person that's online or shares information via their friends and neighbors. And I think that that's really important. So yeah, that's enough for me. But you guys, it's a pleasure to serve with this board and know that there are so many passionate teachers doing heavy lifting. I agree with Brianna LaFontaine that, it's going to be nice when we can pivot and put our energies into working with the state and raising the base for everybody, because our teachers are so deserving. So with that, I'm going to move on to our student representative, Caroline.
Okay, so I'm going to start with Kings Mountain Elementary School. They were awarded a $500 grant by the Cabrillo Education Fund to fund ways to reduce technology stress, and ordered styluses for every student and 4 drawing pads that will be used in conjunction with the Chromebooks. The Kings Mountain Association of Parents Fall Online Auction team put together the first ever online auction that raised $7,166 and included some famous dinner-sized art fair cookies. Then TKK1 has been engaging in a project driven by the question, how can we prepare for a class pet? Which pet to choose is currently locked in a 3-way tie, chickens, turtle, or fish. 2 out of 3 students have been practicing their handwriting skills with mindfulness workbooks. They've completed a biographical interview with a family member and are now working on biography projects about famous people. 2 out of 3, Tyler Ellett was looking to grow his classroom library, and Inkspell Books offered to announce the project on their social media page, and several donations came in totaling $1,200. And some of the books purchased include those that foster diversity sensitivity, and promote anti-racism awareness. 4 out of 5 have embarked on their Genius Hour research projects. Some subjects they are exploring interior design, lava rocks, building websites, the history of Vermont in relation to the Revolutionary War, and photography. Hatch, congratulations to Hatch students for their hard work, determination, and ongoing participation in the online lessons. Teachers are doing an amazing job at adjusting their online teaching schedules to accommodate as many families as possible, to ensure maximum participation and attendance. And Hatch is happy to report that this year's virtual parent-teacher conference was a success, and parents are able to attend their child's virtual conference meetings while gathering information about expectations and the goals for this school year. Positive behavior interventions and support will continue to be implemented by teachers during remote learning. And teachers will set expectations and keep acknowledging this behavior happening during the live lessons. And they are excited to announce that the wonderful students and teacher will soon have access to extended list of online programs, such as Eureka Math, Mystery Science, Seesaw, iStation, Typing Agent, and many others. These supplemental online programs will allow the support to the students, families, and teachers, and complement the adopted curriculum at Hatch. So thank you to the elementary task force team and curriculum and instruction department for this exciting addition. La Costa Adult School has 2 recent accomplishments to share. They had their first completer of a high school equivalency certificate over the summer. Second one of the ESL students recently obtained a job as a substitute custodian through the support of the teachers and the CUSD staff. Otherwise, all classes continue to be done via Zoom learning, which includes online work, Google Meet lessons, sending packets home to students, having phone conversations, and conducting classes through Google Classroom. And they have been able to maintain the majority of the students that initially enrolled within August. Fairlawn Elementary School. Students have been working hard in their Zoom classes as well as on Seesaw and Google Classroom, and 143 students had perfect attendance for the month of September. Last week, they held their first virtual conference during which parents, teachers, and students worked together to create academic and personal goals for the school years. Teachers have been helping students celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month by having them learn about and draw a portrait of Frida Kahlo, draw Mexican folk art flowers and marigolds, design alebrijes, watch ALAS and other kid-based music dance groups from California, listen to mariachi music, and many more. This month, they are hosting 2 Kid Power workshops for parents and guardians, one in English on October 13th and one in Spanish on October 29th. These workshops, parents and guardians will learn how to protect and empower their children with skills to help them be safe from bullying, abuse, and other harm, as well as help them have safe, healthy relationships of all kinds. Registering for this can be found on the school website calendar. Teachers and staff continue to work hard to ensure that the students' basic needs are met and that they are engaged during remote learning. CUNY just finished their 8th grade social studies historicals figure week, all by Zoom. Leadership class also set up a fun spirit activity this week, playing the game Pictionary on a web whiteboard. Woke's Warriors are in first place in the spirit competition for 6th grade, and Miss Woke has not been humble about it. Monday and Tuesday next week will be asynchronous days, and teachers are scheduling assessments and surveys as well as classwork. CUNY Cubs are charging along through remote learning, and it's hard to believe that we are a week away from the end of the first quarter. Thank you.
Dr. McFetridge?
Yeah, that's a lot to respond to, and I write in my notes to respond to comments. First of all, I want to thank Caroline Dodge for keeping it real and reminding us of where the action is and the magic is. And to that point, and echoing Brianna LaFontaine's initial comment, you know, none of this would be possible without the engagement of our students in learning with teachers in classrooms and the support staff that make that possible for that to happen too. And just Brianna, just so you know, when you have people say, stay in your lane, you're right in the right lane. You are an advocate, you're a respected advocate. And so I appreciate your advocacy. That is the lane that the board members need to be in, that the community needs to be in, that the teachers need to be in, that CSEA needs to be in, that we all need to be in right now. So when I heard Abby speak about a fair contract, we want a fair contract too. And back to what Brianna said, she can't believe we're at impasse. It happens. We're at impasse, and here's the deal. Sorry to sound like Joe Biden, but the deal is that when you're at impasse, you have a disagreement. And we've talked about this in many board meetings previously, and I don't want to get into the negotiations because I get taken to task when we divulge those details, and we shouldn't negotiate in public. That's my opinion. And we try to do that, but sometimes you have to give the information. And so just to make this clear, and to, you know, kind of Sean Reardon's comments, we have been able to keep open lines of communication and find agreement. And the whole goal of us negotiating is to find an agreement about what both sides can live with, both sides can compromise to get to. And so I am also optimistic that that will resolve through the impasse process till my dying day. With my dying breath, I will think that that process is not so much about impasse, it's about finding agreement. Eventually, there will be agreement. But we do need to do our due diligence. We do need to provide data to the public and to our partners across the negotiation table about what we think we can afford. The truth of the matter is there is the current state and there is the future state, and we are kind of in the unfortunate position of having to look at the budget 3 years from now. So we will continue to come to the table. We will continue to look at ideas about how to make compromise between the parties until we find an agreement, and there will be an agreement eventually. And it will require a compromise of both sides. So I just want to put that out there. To Ms. Zanetti and about the bond issues, please know I welcome speaking to you about this. The board has had presentations on facilities master planning for the 2 elementary schools. We were asked and tasked as staff to go back and to look at high school also. And there are also things in the bond that are covered that you mentioned, such as energy reducing initiatives that was part of our operational budget. It's in the bond, and we think that's important so that we can get funding for the operational budget to address things like employee raises, quite honestly. Also because it's good for the planet. So that whole triple bottom line piece, it's good for the planet, it's good for the people, it's good for the organization. The tree mitigation, many of you know there have been fires. There continue to be fires. And the tree mitigation is about doing our part by the community and legally what's responsible for us. So it's unfortunate that we either take that out of the bond or we take it out of the general fund. That's important work. The surveillance work is the same. We've had school sites come out and tell us that they need surveillance cameras, security cameras, because we've had vandalism. And we've had issues that are of concern about the health and safety of our children. So Lisa, I'm happy to speak with you about all these things. It does always seem like there are too many goals, and I think that's a theme here, but we have to keep all the balls in the air. We have to keep looking at all the goals, and we have to keep focusing on those most important ones. But I'm happy, as always, to speak to anybody. A community member called me yesterday. We spent an hour on the phone talking about the demographer's report. I mean, I'm happy to talk to you about the whole picture. To Sean Reardon, thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted your dinner hour on Wednesday night to talk to you. I do think we have had open lines of communication. I don't think we always agree, but we continue to talk, and that's good and that's hopeful. I don't think it's hopeless. I think we did come to a compromise with our MOU, and I think that was a give and take, and we continue to talk about that. And you asked me to speak about a few things. I do think the MOU was about health and safety. I've said on numerous occasions that the health and safety of our staff, of our employees, of our families, of our students, of this community are very important, are paramount. If we don't have that, we don't have anything. And for those of us who have known people who have suffered because of the pandemic, or who have lost loved ones because of the pandemic, or in general, that's got to be our number one goal is health and safety, and not just our physical safety, but our emotional wellness, our spiritual wellness. I think that's important. You asked about, would I reaffirm the open lines of communication? Of course, that's what we talked about on Wednesday night. And Stig Lin, as CSEA president, we talk regularly. Sean, I'm glad that we are getting to the point where we can talk regularly. And it is music to my ears when CUTA leadership says they want to be back in the classroom. I also know this is because it is extremely difficult for us to do our job and do our job of educating young people and preparing them for college and career and taking care of them emotionally remotely. And I know this takes a toll on our students, on our families. I know it takes a huge toll on our families right now and on our students. And I know it takes a huge toll on our employees. On Wednesday, a teacher reached out to me and said, Sean, I just hope you understand that I'm working from 7 in the morning to 7 at night every day. It's taking a toll on her family also. I think this is a difficult time. I hope we can all hold ourselves close and take care of one another. I couldn't agree more with Sean Reardon and with Stig Lin. You have an opportunity to vote in November that can make a difference. In my role, I can't tell you which way to vote, but I can tell you that I prepared a resolution for the board at the last board meeting where they supported Proposition 15. And so the board is able to take that, and they made that resolution because it could mean between $1.5 million and $2 million for the district. It would be, that money would be very well used by us. And very needed by us. We are still deficit spending. We are still in a financial issue in the third year budget. Prop 15 could be very good, but I cannot tell you which way to vote. But please vote, and vote early. This means a lot. I do also want to say to Connie Giebelhausen, Myra Rodriguez, and Tino Torres, all CSEA employees who are either retiring or moving on to their next jobs, we have appreciated them greatly. Okay. Mary Beth spoke about having a goal and having a singular goal. And I think the singular goal for us is really right now to just take care of one another, our health, our emotional safety, because that is the precondition for us to meet the other goals. So some of those other goals are going to, how do I say it, be delayed, but we keep working on certain things that we need to work on. I do want to respond in particular to Lizette's comments about Hispanic Heritage Month. As everyone knows, at the last board meeting, we brought the second proclamation 2 years running for Hispanic Heritage Month. I put it in my letter to the community. This is our shared history. Before European Americans were in this nation, this was indigenous land, and then it was Mexican territory. There was Russian territory, but this was really Alta California. So I think it's important for us to recognize that part of our history, and then to recognize the present and to recognize the future. This is a majority population in California. It is a majority student population in this district, and we do need to focus on the data of those students. The Latino Roundtable has met. I'm so happy that they have. I was just speaking or emailing back and forth with Belinda Arriaga from ALAS, Ayudando Latinos a Soñar, the other day. And I have such respect for the work that they do, particularly knowing that they are working on counseling and on tutoring and on food and for all kinds of people. So I just think it's important for us just not to focus on the heritage, but to focus on our present and our people, our brothers and sisters, our kindred spirits, and then to look at the future about how that will be better for us. That has to be our goal of how we improve in our relations. Nuestras relaciones, todas las relaciones, all our relations, I think is the way that the indigenous tribes would say it. I also want to say, in that vein, this week is the first week of LGBTQ History Month, and tonight there will be a presentation on an administrative regulation that we have created with Coast Pride partners about sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression protections. And this partnership with Coast Pride has been instrumental to us, just like our partnership with ALAS and the Latino Advisory Roundtable. We have an LGBTQ Roundtable. This is the way we hear from the people that we must serve and who have been underserved historically and currently. So I want people to keep their eyes on the prize. The goal is making life better and reducing suffering and having compassion for our brothers and sisters, or however we want to talk about that, our kindred spirits. I also want to point out that November is Native American Heritage Month. So earlier in the week, I understand there was an email that went out saying that next Monday is Columbus Day. This is a very divisive term for a lot of people because he is known as a colonizer and is associated with the murder of indigenous people. And so when Lizette brings up that it is also celebrated as Native American Heritage Month or as Indigenous Peoples Day, that is very important for us. And that is the reason why I brought this proclamation, is for us to remember those who came before us, those who are still here, but the Ohlone people who were here 10,000 years ago. We're on their lands. And there's a movement in the Bay Area where every meeting must start by saying, we acknowledge that we are lands that we took from indigenous people, and to acknowledge the crimes that were committed on those people. We have to lift them up too. We have to remember them, and we have to move from a terrible history into a better future by opening our hearts in that way and acknowledging our history. There is a big presentation tonight on opening of schools. On the consent calendar is an item about health and safety, again, particularly about ventilation, HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, particularly with trying to move us to MERV 13, MRV 13 filtration, which is kind of the standard about trying to limit the particulate of aerosolized COVID-19 and we are looking into that and getting that assessment. I am hopeful for that. It is part of our focus on health and safety again. I also think that hopefully we can look to this being, again, a future orientation where we are looking at air quality in our schools, particularly knowing in the last year how much I've heard about how mold has been a problem in the schools because of where you live on the coast side and because of some of the construction issues here. We need to make sure that we are constantly assessing our air quality in this district for our health and safety. And finally, there is going to be a presentation on ongoing sustainability measures and sort of a big picture overview from Sizerco, who looked at the potential of us looking at solar generation, solar storage, so that we are resilient. Because as you know, when the power goes out, if we had solar generation and if we had solar storage, we could save a lot of money from our operating fund that we could use on other things. We could be good to the planet. It would be good for our people because we'd have more money out of our general fund to work for students, programs, and services, and our employees. And in general, it's just good for the planet. I do think that this will be a balancing act with the bond going forward to figure out how we address the schools we need and also take care of the system as a whole. So that's a lot, but I had to speak to all those different things. Thank you very much, and that concludes my report. Thank you, all of you, for listening with open hearts and open minds and listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McFetridge. Next on our agenda are the consent items. Do I have a motion to approve our consent? Our consent items, consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Freya. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Sophia. Mary Beth?
Aye.
Lizette?
Aye.
Freya?
Aye.
Sophia?
Aye.
Aye. Caroline?
Aye.
Motion passes 5+1. Next on our agenda is the presentation of Administrative Regulation 415.1, Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity, and Gender Expression, SOGIE.
Thank you very much. I know my colleague Rosie is going to be bringing up this PowerPoint. You'll see I titled this both in words and in actions. This cannot be just about rhetoric. This cannot just be about empty words. It has to be about action. This has to be about defining equity in board policy and taking concrete efforts to enact it. And I'll walk through this presentation quick. Go ahead, Rosie. Last year, Cabrillo adopted board policy 0415 in 2019, and it was an equity policy. It was a big umbrella policy. And it basically said that the district believes and the board upholds our appreciation for diversity, which we've spoken about tonight in numerous ways, our commitment to safeguarding the rights of marginalized learners has to be an equity focus for us, and our need to review data and plan targeted actions to help us achieve the district mission to address the needs of every student every day. Let me make that clear. We are not currently addressing the needs of every student every day. There is work to be done. We need to own that. We need not to be defensive about it. We need to own that. And one of the ways that we can do that is to have a board policy that says we will look at data, we will look at how our students are doing. We focused in the past looking particularly on socioeconomically disadvantaged, Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, whatever term one wants to use. Tonight we're focusing more on LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning students. BP 0415 outlines the goal of eradicating institutional bias, and we've implemented some actions to those ends. And I appreciated how Lizette talked about our need to have training about implicit and explicit bias. I just want to put it out there. This nation If you go to lgbtqhistory.org, for example, sorry, Rosie put me forward to the questions. She got me done real quick. If you looked at lgbtqhistory.org, for example, you would see that there has been harassment and discrimination against African Americans, Latinos, people of color, Indigenous people, and LGBTQ people, women in this country, in this civilization for centuries. So there's stuff we need to do about that, and we need to own our own biases. And some people this is very uncomfortable for, right? I mean, Robin DiAngelo talks about white fragility, but we think that's very important to do. Tony Thurmond, our state superintendent of public instruction, thinks that's very important to do. Nancy McGee, our county superintendent, thinks that's very important to do. I think it's very important to do. I know a lot of the board members, all the board members think it's important. I think everybody recognizes that we need a world where we love one another and hate one another less. There recently was a grand jury report, and I will be bringing a presentation to the board on that. But there was recently a grand jury report about hate in schools in San Mateo schools. This is an issue. It continues to be an issue. It is a societal issue, and thus it is a school issue. So we need to take steps to address implicit and explicit biases, and our board-approved professional development has focused on that last year, this year, and will continue to focus on that in some shape or form, so we can take care of the social, emotional well-being of all our people. And so tonight, what we're doing is we're presenting how we're operationalizing this equity policy, in particularly with protection and safeguarding of the rights of sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. And we crafted an administrative regulation guiding that. Rosie, you can flip to the next slide. So a standard part of work in a district is you have a board policy that the board approves, and that's like the overarching goal. And then the staff's work is to create administrative regulations sometimes to guide the actions to operationalize, to make real that board policy. So the ARs provide concrete specific actions to be taken day-to-day operations, and that is what is expected of our administrators and our schools and our district office and everybody involved in our schools. It's not typically the case where an AR, an administrative regulation, is presented to the board for approval, but sometimes I like to bring an AR to the board and to the public so they understand the context of what we're talking about. And this one tonight is aligned with our celebration of LGBTQ History Month, and it marks sort of what the next step is for us to take actions to make sure that we protect the needs of students, no matter their sexual orientation, no matter their gender identity, no matter their gender expression. Next slide. So this is also a template for other administrative regulations. The administrative regulation here addresses the rights and needs of all learners. It's specific to SOGI issues. Coast Pride last June for Pride Month did award the board members and several of our administrators and teachers in the district with Super SOGI awards for the work that they're doing in this regard. There is a clear need for this work. Neighboring districts have recently been named in a grand jury report. Half Moon Bay High School did very well, but we know there's work always to be done wherever people are. There's work to do to address hate and to sort of foment love, to bring about an appreciation for diversity, and to address hate speech and to address discriminatory actions that are unacceptable and that we renounce. And this administrative regulation outlines the protections and the supports to be provided to students and families. It lays a groundwork for other administrative regulations. So I have asked principals and staff here to say, this is just one step. Having an LGBTQ roundtable is one step. Having a Latino roundtable is one step. But now we have to take other steps with other administrative regulations to make sure that we are protecting all people. And that means no matter their abilities, no matter their race, no matter their gender, religion, nationality, or sexual orientation. Tonight, the AR that we presented is just about sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression. Next slide. It would take too long for me to read the AR. It's there for the public. The board has reviewed it. Principals have reviewed it. It tells us basically that people have the right to be referred to by the pronouns they prefer and that they identify with. People have the right to use facilities according to their gender identity and gender expression. People have the right to not be harassed or discriminated against because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity or gender expression. That there is a way for when those transgressions exist, that there is a way to provide remedy and to provide complaint process by which people can have injustices remedied. And this is standard in the industry. California Department of Education demands it. We have policies based on hate speech and hate associated actions already existing. This just makes that more real and really makes it more real so that if you have an LGBTQ kid, if you have a trans kid, if you have a lesbian or a gay or a bisexual or a queer or questioning kid or family or a staff member, that they are afforded every right and privilege as an American, as a Californian, and as a co-sider to live the good life and to be able to be themselves freely. I want to thank Coast Pride. They worked with us on this. They created an LGBTQ roundtable with us. They are instrumental partners to us, a phenomenal group. We look forward to the continuing partnership with them and with others in other kind of work to create other administrative regulations going forward. I do want to thank our former colleague, Dr. Holly Wade, for the work that she did on this last year also with the Coast Pride. And I do want to thank Jenny Walter in particular for the work that she did with me this summer to get this into an administrative regulation to align with our equity policy so that we can make sure that we codify and have a very clear way of how we protect everyone. And if people are somehow treated as they should not be treated, that there are ways that we can remedy that. And I think that concludes my presentation. Oh, next steps. I think I basically said all this. We're going to continue with professional development and trainings about this issue, about LGBTQ issues. We're going to continue to provide counseling as needed and to work with Coast Pride on efforts like that. I did provide a grant application here that Dr. Patia, bless you, Leticia, that she created so that we could apply for monies with the California Department of Education for this kind of work. And we will look forward to future presentations to show you more progress on how we operationalize and make real the equity policy, which is an overarching policy, but how we make that real in action. And that concludes this presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. McFetridge. I think this is very constructive for our district. Do we have questions, comments from the board?
I have just a comment, just to say a big thank you to all who are involved in pulling this together. I think this is really a great model for how we build our systems to support all our learners. And Sean spoke to just the diversity of student populations that need that. I don't want to say extra support because it's more like the idea of changing our fundamental systems more, towards those needs. So like looking at the AR, the idea of, and you didn't go through this in detail, Sean, but just kind of having reviewed it in advance, just the idea of things like being able to track people's preferred pronouns and using them, having that codified in an administrative regulation, I think is really super critical because those ARs and those board policies define who we are and how we do what we do. So I think this is really tremendous and appreciate that you're applying for more grants to get more support for it, and definitely serves as a great model for further codification, how we support, make sure that our fundamental systems, the bread and butter basics of what we do and how we do it, support not only LGBTQ students, but students, Latinx background or different abilities, different, other parameters as well. So this is really great. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. McFetridge. Next on our agenda is item 5B, Proclamation endorsing November as National Native American Heritage Month.
So I'll ask Rosie to bring up the actual proclamation. I think it is important to actually look at the proclamation. It's short. November is usually considered as Native American Heritage Month. As we've discussed, next week would be celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day. I think it's important for us to remember that. It'll probably take a minute for Rosie to bring up the proclamation. There it is. Okay, so basically, just so everybody knows, in some ways, this is language that you would see in other proclamations. It talks about, on a federal level and on a state level, National Native American Heritage Month celebrates the accomplishments of the original inhabitants, explorers, and settlers of the United States. We talked about that at the beginning of the hour. And Native Americans have made distinct and important contributions to California, the United States, the rest of the world. And when you get this from a national point to California, there are more than 100 recognized tribes in California, more than any other state in the nation. I will say this is a small identified group of people here currently in our district. But I want to also talk about the intersectionality of that with our Latinx population, because many people will know that Hispanic peoples, Latino peoples, Latinx, however you want to describe this, there is a huge intersection in the New World between Indigenous peoples and the Latinx, culture, history, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just think that's very important that there's this intersection here. In 2010, in the last census, there were over 720,000 individuals in California of Native American descent. It's the largest Native American population in the 50 states. And if you keep going down, I want to point out that at the time of first European contact, the San Francisco and Monterey Bay areas were the home to at least 50 Indian tribes, each with its own territories and dialects. And those tribes are now often known as the Ohlone people. And the ancestral past of the Ohlone people, I spoke a little bit this in my earlier comments, span 10,000 years, reaching back to the Ice Age, predating European contact that happened just really a few hundred years ago. So, when we say the original settlers, these Ohlone people were from here. They came here so long ago. And they, many people have been talking about Indigenous people lately, in particular about talking about fire control and how the ancient ways were much better, and that the Ohlone and other native tribes, Indigenous people, had such a respect for the land. So considering how many wrongs have been done to Native American peoples, I humbly submit this to you so that we can recognize the importance of Native Americans and Indigenous and Ohlone peoples to this area, to understand their history, to understand their contributions, to honor their cultures, to honor their lives. And I recommend you proclaim November as National Native American Heritage Month.
Thank you, Dr. McFetridge. Do I have a motion to declare November as National Native American Heritage Month?
So moved.
Thank you, Lizette. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Comment, discussion?
I'll chime in if no one else wants to go first. I want to thank you, Sean, for bringing this to us. I really also want to point out your comment about intersectionality, because I think that's a concept in social justice that hasn't explicitly come up in many of our meetings in the past, but Lizette kind of referred to it earlier when she talked about students of Latinx heritage who are classified as special, with special needs, special educational needs. you spoke just now about Latinx students that have, in fact, Native heritage as well. It comes up in other districts with more of a Muslim community than we have, around girls and dress codes and headscarves. So I think, it's so important to constantly think about all the different needs that students have, and many of those needs are multiple within a student, a given student or employee or community member. So I think always important as we think about our advocacy, that we think about all of those things. I also want to thank you for connecting this general proclamation for us to the Native community here, the Ohlone tribe. And I think that's really important that we kind of take the general proclamation of honoring Native Americans more broadly to what that means for our community here. So thank you for that extra research to really make it meaningful for us here on the coast side. That's all.
Thanks, Sophia. Hearing no other comments, I think this is a worthy proclamation to vote on at this time. Sophia?
Aye.
Aye for myself. Freya?
Aye.
Mary Beth?
Aye.
Lizette?
Aye.
Caroline?
Aye.
Motion passes 5+1. Next on the agenda is 5C, update on reopening of school plan and approval of new recommendations.
And Dr. Bhatia has slipped off the screen, or has she not? Well, we can start this.
Okay, Rosie, if you please set up the slides.
Perfect.
Members of the board, we want to bring to you the recommendations for the opening of schools, and Dr. Bhatia will have a second part. She will come back to this, but Rosie, can you please get the next slide? And in this presentation, we want to bring to you the recommendations for the opening of schools, and getting to you what the steering committee update on the work that it has been doing. Dr. Bhatia will discuss with you the survey results, and that you will get an update on technology, an update on the enrollment, current enrollment, and on the engagement. You will also hear from me an update on the budget. So Rosie, can you please give us to the next slide? And we want to discuss with you the recommendations for the reopening of schools, which are summarized in the next slide. In the next slide, we basically have come after discussions with the reopening of schools and our stakeholders to begin phase 1.5, which would be a modified phase 2, in which we would allow to bring our students for in-person instruction with the proper PPE and with making sure that everybody feels safe as soon as possible, but of course, after October 16, which is next week, which is what had been established by the board at an earlier meeting. And on this, given that we are now at the red risk level in our county, we would be applying for a waiver as soon as possible, if that is what needs to happen. And we would also be considering the beginning of phase 3, when we would be at a level of moderate, that is that the number of COVID cases are lower, and for at least 2 to 3 weeks, so that we can begin the hybrid learned model in full. And at this moment, given we're just projecting when that might be, we're projecting that that might be happening at the January, by mid-January. We have heard from our CUTA that they are eager to come back and support. Parents are ready for us to start bringing our students little by little until we arrive at phase 3 in a safe manner for our students, for our staff, and of course with the full support of everybody, all hands on deck. So this is the recommendation to the board at this moment, and we will be coming back to this recommendation as we go through this presentation.
Jesus, I'm back. I apologize. I had
Okay.
somehow very timely, I got kicked out. So I apologize about that. I'll take it from here if that's okay.
All right, go right ahead.
Thank you.
If I can have a point of privilege here, I just want to focus on what this is really about. We are trying to focus on the health and safety of our employees, our families, and our students. And you see here words like PPE, which is the protective equipment. And you see serving at promise students, the students who need to be served that we're trying to get back in. And we're talking about red and orange and purple and all that. And the county's trying to get us a testing regimen so that we can test our employees regularly. And we talked about ventilation, and all this is about health and safety. But I just want to talk about too, for the emotional safety, if I can, at the top of the hour, CUTA said, and I'm just saying, I'm seeing a text now asking me to make sure that everybody knows that CUTA is not causing this in some ways to be a bargaining issue. I don't know where that idea comes from. We're all in agreement on the opening school steering committee, which I don't serve on because I want to make it as neutral as possible. But everybody's in agreement that it's not ready. We're not ready. Most of the districts are not ready or not starting back. There are 3 districts in the county that are, because they're highly resourced, and they were able to do it, and they're very small in their elementary districts. I have heard from CUTA folks that they are looking forward to coming back to campus. And I have heard from CUTA co-president Sean Reardon that this is not a bargaining issue. I do not believe it is. We are all committed to making this about health and safety first, for the good of our students, for the good of our families, for the good of our teachers, for the good of our classified staff, for the good of the order, for the good of the community. So Leticia, I just wanted to frame that, and I'll let you go to it.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, President Hines, Governing Board, community colleagues. Thank you. And so I'll pick it up from here. I do want to say that these recommendations, and I'm sure Jesus mentioned that as well, they come after analyzing qualitative and quantitative data from opening of school steering committee, from our DLAC, from surveys that we have sent out. And a common theme around all of the conversation is that, yes, we need to tread lightly. And most importantly, we need to start at some level serving our at-promise students. These are our English learners and our students with disabilities. And even, coincidentally, I want to talk about the 3rd bullet in phase 1.5, our modifies phase 2. And as we have always said, we need to be ready to change directions at any time. On Monday, Dr. McFetridge, our cabinet, we all attended our San Mateo County Office of Education update from our superintendent, Nancy McGee, where now the waiver is now put to the side. Now districts are no longer required to submit a waiver. So when we wrote this 10 days ago, it was one thing. We did have to submit a waiver, but as of this Monday, the direction has slightly changed. And so we are going to be continue to work with our opening of school steering committee, continue to obtain input. And now the process for reopening would be to submit a request for review of plan to open for in-person instruction. And we already have much of the information that is required, but we need to condense it in a certain application submitted to the county. And they do say that they will try to review the data as soon as possible, within 1 to 2 weeks. A recommendation that came from the San Mateo County Office of Education is to slowly phase in groups, to not begin all at once. So when we're looking at phase 1.5, and also taking into consideration the data that we will quickly review in a few seconds, about 50% of our staff is either comfortable or highly comfortable and would want to return as soon as possible. And so again, we want to take very small steps to make sure that we have the protocols in place, we have systems in place for ensuring that our students and our staff are safe when we do start seeing students. And so we definitely would like to begin with small groups of our most at promise students with disabilities, and our newcomer students, which would be students who have been in the country 0 to 2 years. And also possibly take into consideration learning pods. This is a concept that already is being implemented by some of our partners, but the recommendation would be for the governing board to support us beginning that planning, and begin to now, instead of the waiver, it would be to submit a plan for opening in-person instruction. And about a month ago, we came to you, or 2 months ago, we asked for the governing board to approve us starting no sooner than October 16th, which is just around the corner. And as Dr. McFetridge said, we are just not ready at this time. And so we would like to request and recommend to the board to begin phase 3, which would be the hybrid learning model, and the students who have and families who have selected that model, making sure that we begin with that only if the COVID-19 risk is at an orange level, which is 2 to 4.9% moderate of positive cases, and then begin to plan and determine how we can slowly start phasing in 1 grade level at a time, which is a recommendation from our County Office of Ed. And we would like to, again, ask for so now instead of October 16, we'd like to push that day forward to January 18th. And you might ask, why January 18th? I definitely want to give kudos to our opening of school steering committee and parents, Amber, from Kings Mountain, who definitely gave the recommendation to not begin immediately after a break, especially a winter break, because there will be movement, and we want to make sure that we allow for that COVID incubation period. And we'd like to start 2 weeks after we would return from winter break, which would be January 18th for the hybrid learning model. And so then the next slide.
Before we move, I just want to call out at the bottom of that slide, it says subject to consultation with employees and bargaining units. That is a requirement of the waiver that we consult. The MOU that we created with CUTA and the MOU that we're working on currently with CSEA are all about the health and safety of the return or the practice of remote learning. We put that in there just to make sure that we need to make sure we're consulting with our employees and our bargaining units. That said, I want to reiterate what my friend Sean Reardon said at the beginning of the meeting. This is very separate from the discussion about the contract and compensation. I agree with Sean totally. These are separate issues. And it was very heartening to me to hear our CUTA colleagues and representatives earlier this week say that they were interested in returning back to school. So I just want to make sure that that's very clear. We just put subject to consultation with employees and bargaining units just so everybody understands that is the work that we intend to do. We are committed to doing that. We respect that part of working with our employees and our colleagues.
Thank you, Sean. And the next slide, Rosie. So the next slide will provide you with an overview of our opening of school steering committee dates. We've already met a couple of times, and again, I just want to thank our steering committee members that have been instrumental in bringing recommendations to the board. And then here in this slide, we want to share with you what are some of the guiding questions that led to these conversations and to the recommendations. These guiding questions we used during our opening of school steering committee as well as our first DLAC. And so we asked the groups what's working, what can be improved in regards to remote learning. Should we send out surveys? And of course, the recommendation was let's send out a survey, but with essential topics. What were at the time, the collective thoughts of the waiver, which now will be an application to the San Mateo County Office of Education. And also we discussed the phases and when we would like to propose a new phase-in model. And so these were just the questions that led to the recommendations. And on the next slide, you're going to see the themes that came up from our two major advisory committees. And as you can see, for our opening of school steering committee, and I'll just highlight a few of these. It was important to note that our students were most productive in the morning. This was also a common theme from our district English Learner Advisory Committee, that students, they prefer to have instruction in the synchronous learning in the morning and more independent asynchronous after lunchtime. We also heard from our steering committee that the length of Zoom classes in elementary should be, again, similar, should be scheduled by noontime. And we already discussed the recommendations. We took those two recommendations to begin the modified phase 2, phase 1.5, and begin phase 3 on the previous slide. So I won't spend time reviewing these two bullets. And also, we did hear from our steering committee that we do need continued training and support on technology needs for both parents and for our teachers. And a theme that came out from our certificated staff is that our certificated staff would like us as a district to determine more trainings for parents so that the technology training is not solely falling on the responsibility of the classroom teacher. And so we'll be definitely working with Randy Rudolph to determine how we can support and alleviate the technology training from our teachers. And again, another recommendation was that our staff would prefer to return and will feel much more comfortable to come in the moderate level of COVID-19 risk. That would be the orange level. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the levels in the next slide. And also there was a concern about the shortage of custodial staff, that as we begin reopening, we need to make sure that we have a clear plan on what to do when custodial staff may be short. And in regards to our district English Learner Advisory Committee, I want to definitely give a big thanks to our Rosalba Segura, our community liaisons, our principals, and many teachers who attended DLAC and ELAC. It's nice to see such a great involvement from all of our stakeholders at DLAC. We had 24 parents who attended in a remote learning matter, and we were pleasantly surprised. I mean, of course, we always shoot for 100, but we're very happy that our first DLAC, compared to last year in person, I think the number was 6. And so it's great to know. And Lisette, thank you so much for always being there and being an advocate. We really appreciate your presence at DLAC. And I definitely want to share and again, thank our amazing teachers and staff and office support, class or community liaisons. The main theme that came out when we asked the question, what's working? All of our parents said that what's working is our teachers. and our office staff who is always willing and able to support, and community liaisons who do an immense amount of outreach to make sure that they help. So definitely wanted to give a shout out to all CUSD staff on that comment from DLAC. Although hardware did not come out as being an issue, there still is a need to fix some Wi-Fi access, in particular when there are more than 2 students in a household. And again, some of the stories that we hear from our home visits are that sometimes there have been home visits where you have 10 students trying to log in to Zoom classes in one household with a grandmother who doesn't know how to handle technology and who speaks Spanish. And so hence is the importance of us receiving your approval to begin that modified phase 2, to begin to look at how we can start to possibly implement the concept of learning pods within our own district, and either look at current staff that may be able to come in and act as a tutor and help with the sign in and log in and extra support, or potentially even hire staff to support like a tutors to come and support those learning pods in the school. Now, of course, I won't, you can read the other bullets, so I'll continue for the interest of time to the next slide. And you may already be very aware of the 4 different colors from the blueprint for safer economy. And so were previously in widespread, where we had more than 8% of positivity rate. Right now, the San Mateo County Office of Ed allows districts that submit a plan, an opening of schools plan, to open within the substantial level. I definitely want to clarify, and we clarified on Monday, that if we submit a plan and the county approves our plan, and let's say we return back to widespread purple area, they will not make us shut down. There are other factors that could potentially have us shut down, which would be more than 5% of COVID positive cases within a classroom or within a school. However, with that said, all of our opening of school steering committee has recommended that our staff is still not too comfortable. Most of our staff, and you'll see the data in a second, is not comfortable returning in substantial. They feel comfortable returning when we have been at least 2 to 3 weeks in the orange moderate level with 2 to 4.9% positivity rate. Okay, and then the next few slides will demonstrate some of the data coming from the survey sent for parents and staff. And this slide will just show that in regards to returning to hybrid model, about 50, it was an even split, about 50-50, 50% of our staff that felt anywhere from comfortable to highly comfortable, and the other 50% feeling highly uncomfortable or uncomfortable. Next slide. Were our parents, and we had slightly more, still a little 60-40 percentage, where 60% of our families felt highly comfortable or comfortable, and 40% of our families did not feel comfortable coming back. And the next slide. And so this slide, we did differentiate by grade level responses, individual staff responses in regards to their comfort level. And so the red is uncomfortable or highly uncomfortable. I apologize for that typo at the top. So the red is uncomfortable, highly uncomfortable. And as you can see, it does vary. Our TKK, a little over 50% of our TKK teachers are ready to come back as long as we set up the PPE, we give enough staff to support with the various needs of opening of schools, such as taking the temperatures, making sure that the classroom is cleaned between cohorts. And first grade was a little bit slightly under 50%. There was a significant drop in second grade. We had about 45%, a little bit of an increase in fourth grade. And as you can see, the secondary level, mostly our teachers were not comfortable, and most likely it's due to the fact that our secondary students do transmit COVID at a much higher rate than our lower elementary. And so just wanted to share this slide, which is divided by individual responses from teachers within each grade level. And then the next slide. So when we're looking, and if it's okay, I'll just skip the waiver slide since the waiver is no longer pertinent. So we can skip the two waiver application responses, Rosie, to this slide. And here about 60% of staff was not comfortable returning in red code when it's substantial. I already mentioned this. Of course, in the narrative responses from staff, many staff did respond to say that once they see the PPE and we continue to define the details of what that classroom will look like, and also if we return in the orange coded level as a moderate COVID case, risk case, definitely a bigger percentage of teachers would feel comfortable to return. So I want to clarify that. Go ahead, Sean.
If I can add, I mean, I think this is understandable and should be understandable for families and students and employees. We are still working with the San Mateo County Office of Education on a testing regimen. We will be required to test all our employees. Many districts are held up on this because they don't have the resources to do it otherwise. We're lucky that the San Mateo County Office of Education has been working on a contract with Curative to do testing for our employees. That'll come up later. And also on the consent agenda, we also put a contract there to assess the ventilation of our classrooms. So we do think that this is just part and parcel of so many districts trying to make sure that we can instill the logic of confidence for families and staff to be able to return.
Yes, thank you. And I do have to say our parents definitely understand. And it's just been great to have such a collaborative meeting with many stakeholders. And I really appreciate that. And then next slide, from our parent responses, we had about 60-40 split with 40% of parents saying that they were not comfortable, 60% saying they are comfortable coming back in the red phase. And the next slide is in regards to phase 2, which would be bringing in the at-promise students. And as I mentioned earlier, the majority of all stakeholders, about 60%, have mentioned, in particular staff, 60% of our staff felt comfortable or highly comfortable starting to plan how we can support our students with disabilities, as well as our English learners and any other at-promise subgroup.
If I can barge in here again, I just do want to thank our partners, the Boys and Girls Club, who have been providing spaces on our campuses, you know, as partners with our technology help in our spaces to do this work for those who need it. I do want to thank Lori Malliot and the Dolphin Club because I believe they started this week. I do want to thank the special education staff who are now doing assessments and also the English for our English language learners. We've been doing testing also and assessing for these groups. So we are starting to get kids onto campus, whether it's athletics, whether it's our at-promise students, and we hope to do more of that. And I think we are starting to see teachers in particular. Our CSEA staff have been working. I know that they've been ready and our CUTA staff are starting to come in and indicate that they're ready to start doing this for us with these smaller groups now.
Thank you. And the next slide will show you our parent responses. Parent responses were 75% very comfortable, highly comfortable and comfortable in bringing back at-promise students. And the next slide, phase 3. Again, it's about a 50-50 split for staff to begin the phase 3 remote learning model, of course, with the caveat that the responses may be different once we have those contact tracing and testing, COVID testing protocols in a sample classroom. I know that Jesus and Joseph Santoni and San Mateo County they're working on in our principals, our secondary principals and staff there is a committee that is looking into outdoor learning spaces. And so thank you for that. So of course that if once our staff sees that, this percentage may increase once we have all of these small little details defined. And again, the recommendation tonight is for us to define that. Next slide, then you'll see the parent responses in regards to coming back, and 60%, well, about 60%, about 70% of our parents said that they would return phase 3 of instruction. Sorry, 60%. I'm looking at a different slide, 60%. And then the next slide, and then that is it. So I definitely want to just loop back into that first comment. Those 2 recommendations for today would be to, 1, begin phase 1.5, a modified phase 2, by allowing those staff members that are ready to return, such as our special education teachers and any other staff that may want to begin to serve our at-promise students. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean our classroom teachers, because we would ask that classroom staff member if they feel comfortable, and should the PPE and the COVID protocols be aligned, then they would return. Otherwise, we want to begin to plan spaces for our students and at-promise students to have a safe space to learn, where they have internet, they have bilingual paraprofessionals or special education paraprofessionals that can support them with the logging on into the Zooms. And then next would be our technology update. And Jesus, would you be presenting for technology?
Real quick, just format wise, should we save our questions for the end, or if we have questions on that particular part, should we go ahead and ask them now? I don't know how we prefer to do that.
I think questions would be fine.
So prefer it as we go, kind of as part of the process, or at the end?
I think we have to do so moved and all that before we ask questions, though.
It's a parliamentary procedure, but if you want to ask questions, and the president usually would tell us if you're okay with that cadence.
Kim, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm okay with questions now.
Okay, I just had a couple on this last section, Leticia, before we move on to technology, if that's okay. I just wanted to kind of clarify the dates in terms of what we're talking about in terms of the plan moving forward and what we're approving. So if maybe I'll just reiterate what I understand at this point from looking at not just what that summary page was, but also from the notes from the steering committee page, was that you are requesting permission to submit a plan to the county to begin phase 1.5, which would bring small cohorts of at-risk, at-promise students back to school to have that support. They would not return until after Thanksgiving break. And then the question then I have is, with this plan, would we then see the plan? Would the public see the plan as well? Is there a further approval process from the board to look at that plan and how that would work?
Yes, we would want you to see the plan when we submit the plan. The question though is that we for phase, yes, so let's start with the phase 1.5. We want to begin as soon as possible. It looks like it could be around November, but so yes, we went back and forth and we talked about possibly beginning this modified phase 2 after Thanksgiving break. But then we went back and said, well, we want to serve the students. If we could serve them earlier, we don't want that after Thanksgiving to hold us back. And then and yes, correct, we would need your approval for us to submit the plan. And I mean, and that would be a Sean question, or at the pleasure of the board. We can bring it to you if you would like, but that may, if let's say the plan would be ready in 3 weeks, then we may have to hold a special board meeting. I would have to
think through this as well, because I feel comfortable just on a personal level, I'm expressing my opinion now about this, saying, yeah, let's go forward and figure out what the plan is, but not yet knowing, kind of like the teachers, I feel like, not yet knowing what all our exact protocols are, what our testing regimen is going to be. it's kind of like in concept, yes. But I think if we're talking about, I guess I would recommend, if we're talking about how we're going to structure it, that as we move forward, we err on the side of a little bit more public opinion on it, public comment on it, because what we're basing it on is teachers, staff, parents feeling comfortable with this return. And it would be easier to do that if the plan was really clearly laid out. There was an opportunity for people to make comments, et cetera. So I guess that would be my recommendation, that there be some kind of, that if we approve it tonight, we approve it in concept, but that there is an opportunity to then really lay that out, what you're laying out to the county, what the county has approved, or before I don't know how that works. Probably need to kind of know that the county is going to approve it before I don't know. This is all new territory. That would just be my kind of question. And in terms of,
I think an easy way to answer that would be to say that we will come back in November. And I guess I would ask whether or not the board would feel comfortable if we had employee approval to bring back, potential groups, smaller groups earlier, but then create a plan and bring it back in November for all to see.
Yeah. Sorry, I think maybe there's that 1.5, the midpoint is where I'm getting confused. I thought it stated that no earlier than October 16, like for small groups, for special ed kids, for English language learners. If the MOU teachers agree and there's a plan to do it safely, then I don't need to see that other plan. That would be me for that interim piece.
Yes, that's what we're saying. So basically we would have to submit 2 plans. Plan for phase 2, modified phase 2, which is kind of 1.5. And then we have to come back and submit a plan for the hybrid learning model where we would serve the phase 3.
Got it. Okay.
And I apologize. We just went to the training on Monday, so I need the weekend to kind of peruse all the resources that they gave us, as this is new news. We all attended this training Monday at 1 p.m.
Okay,
and so
we are getting a little bit out of order because it did. Thank you, Freya, for your questions, and I think we need to make sure on what it is we're approving tonight. So why don't we listen to the technology update, and then let's go back to that proposal page that summarizes it when we actually go to finish our discussion.
I do have another question around there. Should I hold it?
Go on and ask it so it's in context.
Okay. I had a question about the teachers when they're saying they're highly uncomfortable. I'm assuming it's because of the virus. But is there any feeling, do you have any feeling that it could be because of the difficulty with doing the teaching when you're trying to deal with kids at home learning and kids sitting in front of you learning? Is that part of the problem that we need to, or they need?
Well, we wouldn't expect a teacher. The main problem is COVID, I think. They're just not feeling safe, especially 6 through 12.
Okay.
I really feel, and then with what we just learned, and people on our cabinet can chime in, what we learned on Monday was that they want us to slowly ease opening. So they want us to begin with, let's say K1, then wait 3 weeks, they told us, then bring 2, 3, and then wait 3 weeks. So if you add that up, we won't be opening at the secondary until March or April. And then is it even worth it to open? So these are all questions that, again, it's very new. We still have to have conversations. Sean, were you going to say something?
Always. I just want to thank Leticia and everybody on the Opening School Steering Committee. Once again, we're kind of building the plane as we fly it, and we were all in a presentation on Monday with county office who was talking to private schools, public school districts. Many school districts are talking about not being able to get back until January because of these concerns. Some school districts are starting it up, but they're all elementary school districts. We would want to phase this in And so it was music to my ears to hear that some of our CUTA representatives say they would be interested in doing that. We no longer need in a waiver under purple, you would need to show that you consulted. We have consulted. We're going to put a plan in. We're going to continue to consult, even though for the plan for return, that's not required. But we need to do that because if we can't get staff back because they're not comfortable, we can't make it work. So that's the issue. But we will try to phase it in K1, 2, or K1, TKK 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then up to the secondary. The secondary is much more difficult because the class sizes get larger and because you have more students on a campus. So I think we'll have to bring that back, and we will talk to CSEA and CUTA ongoing. Their representatives are texting and emailing saying, make sure everybody knows that we want to get back on campus. You heard from them today. I heard from them this week. This remote learning is challenging for them too, but we have to take some steps about testing. We have to take some tests about making sure our spaces are ready. And that just is taking a longer time for all districts right now.
And I'm, I don't know, back to, Trustee Alexander, so I think, to answer your question, first of all, yes. And I think that we probably should bring back the report. I would feel comfortable for the community and for you to see the report. And of course, our steering committee would be involved in reviewing the draft report. And I'll have to look at my colleague, Martha Ladd, because she and I will be taking the reins on this. And I think I'll have to talk with her. We can probably submit something in about 3 weeks. We'll be ready. We'll be ready for the next board meeting. And yes, and possibly begin in November.
Okay. I will say I'm confused when you're saying begin in November. Is that when you're talking phase-in approach? Because I'm seeing your chart that said no earlier than January. So that's where I'm getting confused.
For phase 2. So there's modified phase 2, and there's phase 3. In order for us to see our students with disabilities and serve our English learners in small groups, such as in a learning pod, we can submit the application and have that ready. And maybe I have to look at it because, again, this is a new process. Depends how complex it is. And I've heard that maybe 20% of applications get kicked back from San Mateo County because it's missing information. So again, it would depend on that. So for phase 2, this is what I've heard. We want to serve the students as soon as possible. And if we wait until the November board meeting, that means we won't serve them as soon as possible.
But you're talking about at promise students in groups, but at promise students individually are already coming back. Is
well,
that
for
right?
testing only, not for instruction, for testing.
Okay.
These would
These would be
some of our special education staff. They are asking our administration, are asking us to, they want to start, like, if they can't start tomorrow, they would start tomorrow. Some of them.
So if you get it ready sooner, we would have a meeting whenever we'd make a meeting.
Why? So I thought when I read this packet that we were being asked to approve this plan, that when that opportunity to do now the application and all of that was in place, if the county approves, we're then approved to go back for small groups.
Yes, that's what we want.
And that's what my sense was, there was a higher confidence on behalf of teachers and that an MOU has to be in place. So I don't feel like I personally, as one board member, needs to be in the middle of that.
Yes, and that would be the easiest way to serve students.
And so I would rather approve this plan as it's presented and not ask for another check-in, we're still going to have November, December, January board meetings before we would get to that January date to see if phase 3 would be ready to go. So again, we kind of jumped the gun. I'm sorry, apologies on my part for the conversation before we actually asked for a motion. But I think this was clarifying.
You summarized it, President Hines. That's exactly what we need. And for phase 3, since it involves a larger population of students and staff, we would bring that application, and they call it addendums. So if, let's say, you submit an application to serve one cohort of students, they can approve that. And if we want to serve more, then you would amend that as an addendum.
Okay.
And that we could bring to you next board meeting. To hopefully, should the condition be in orange on January 18th, then we would start to slowly phase in the hybrid learning students.
Okay.
And by the way, we don't have school January 18th. Do we know that? It's Martin Luther King Day.
Okay.
It seems like a weird date when we don't have school that day.
Gotcha.
19th.
Let's go.
To the 19th.
Okay.
Let's pull back to the order and get through the rest of the presentation and then come back to the motion.
Okay, I will present on behalf of Randy Rudolph to save us some time from getting him in. Oh, his slide was there just a minute ago. 24, yeah. So again, in support of distance learning, the technology department and the schools have worked to distribute Chromebooks to each student. They configured new laptop computers for each teacher so they could use them in the classroom or at home. And because we had to replace those computers anyway, because they were too old. We increased Wi-Fi coverage on campus and in outdoor areas at the high school and in the intermediate school, so that if teachers want to take their classrooms outside, they could do that and there would be Wi-Fi access. We increased the Wi-Fi access on those campuses. We installed large Wi-Fi hotspots at Pillar Ridge. I do understand, and I want to give credit to the county library system, the Half Moon Bay Library, for working with us and providing us technology, which they had and that we could get from them. And I just want to give them credit where credit is due. There it is. We worked with the San Mateo Library and the Half Moon Bay Library to distribute individual hotspots that they had. We worked with the San Mateo County on public Wi-Fi for Moon Ridge and Pillar Ridge locations. That work is still, the Mid-Penn people have been great at Moon Ridge in particular on working to make sure that they've been addressing technology. And that's an issue. And I think they're working on trying to get free public Wi-Fi there too, which is a plus, a bonus needed to happen for this situation. But I think it's going to be ongoing, hopefully, and help us ease the digital divide. We added several new learning applications for teachers, students. I would say that this is not just several, it's like double digit. Am I right there, Dr. Bhatia? There were so many requests for all these new learning applications, which is also a plus because when we get back on campus, we know that there's going to be all these different tools that we could possibly use ongoing, and that teachers are learning new chops and new skills in that way. We provided district-sponsored Zoom accounts for remote instruction. We provided the Zoom accounts for all our employees. When we heard that Google Meet wasn't enough, they wanted Zoom, so we worked on that. Continual monitoring of the needs of teachers, students, and parents to troubleshoot their challenges as needed. We would encourage people to talk to their teachers, to work with their principals, and then our technology department will provide support, and that's done on a one-on-one basis also, and to be available in person or remotely to provide on-demand tech support. And I also want to thank Dr. Bhatia for working on professional development, whereby over the summer and in this fall, we had some teachers who took some San Mateo County, San Mateo Community College system classes to be able to provide technology support to their colleagues. And so we afforded them that opportunity to provide extra assistance and to provide some planning for that. And in general, there's just been a big push. The digital divide continues to be a problem. And it's based on socioeconomics, and it's racially predictable sometimes. It is also got to do with the tech savvy of families. So we know how difficult this is, but we think that this is getting better, and it is an issue up and down the state, and it is particularly an issue in the coast side. I want to give kudos to our teachers and our classified staff for trying to figure out how to make this work. For my team, so much more savvy technologically than I am. Rosie Acosta, thank you so much. Josefina Infanzon, thank you so much. The fact that we're able to translate in real time in these meetings when we can and set it up for board meetings, I think is great. And I want to thank Rosie and Josefina for helping us set that up with Randy. And I want to thank Leticia for keeping on this too. And we know that there are always going to be more that we can do, and we will continue to look at doing more. But that's sort of in a nutshell, the technology work that's been happening.
In the spirit of closing the digital gap, we are also working with our adult school to try to get those resources to serve the parents and the grandma who is not who is serving or helping 5-10 kids to get on the internet. So we're exploring and trying to bring those resources as well to the table so that we can support our adults who are supporting our children at home.
Okay.
The next slide, Rosie. I believe it may be.
So I'll do this slide too. Jason can't be with us. So if you go to the next slide, this is an enrollment report, and it shows just the numbers currently enrolled. And you will see that at the bottom line, sometimes we want to look at this at the aggregate. I mean, certainly you can see how many students. I'll have to move my there. You know, at El Granada, currently 336 students. At Fairlawn View, 172 students. At Hatch, English only or traditional, whatever people want to call that, is 208. Hatch Immersion is 333. Kings Mountain, 56. Cunha, 667. Half Moon Bay High School, 990. Pilarcitos, 27. And then you'll see the independent study numbers there, 10 at El Granada, 29 for Fairlawn View, which would explain why Fairlawn View looks like it's smaller this year. Also the move of some Moonridge students to Hatch. Hatch independent study 24, Kings Mountain 1, Cunha 9, Half Moon Bay High School 70, Pilarcitos 1. You look at the grand total at the bottom, 2,933. We've seen demographers' reports in the past year that have been talking about how we are a district of declining enrollment. Jason and his colleague, Jackie Sullivan, bless them, did give me a number on this just so you can know this as far as total enrollment loss. The high school has lost 12 students from last year to this year. Cunha has lost 79 students last year, this year. The elementary schools have lost 101 students from last year to this year. And that is greater than what the demographers report would have predicted, because we know that we're losing numbers of students. In 2025, we're anticipated to have fewer than 1,100 students at the elementary schools, which is something we need to keep an eye on as far as data. But a bright spot of this, and something that wasn't expected, was that we had an increase in our kindergarten enrollment by 20 students. So that may mean we'll have to keep an eye on that. We're going to have a demographer come back and sort of explain sort of what COVID has done in the county as far as enrollment. But then again, this is just an enrollment report we wanted to provide. There you go. And that's the big numbers again of 2933. Employee testing, you know, I spoke to this earlier, and I can speak to this again. I think Susan Vana may have worked with Martha Ladd and Leticia and Jesus on this. We're partnering with the San Mateo County Office of Education. We hope to be added and intend to be added, want to be added to their master contract with a company named Curative. And Curative is a system by which employees could work on testing, and it would be a saliva swab testing solution where employees and other staff members, all our employees, would cough and then get the saliva, and then they'd be able to do that independently, submit it here, or submit it at some place to deposit it. And then that testing could be administered in groups on a rotating basis. And just so you know, that the state law would be every 60 days, you have to have all your employees tested. But in general, what we're seeing is that most of the districts would go for every 2 weeks, because if you waited a whole month, that's not rapid enough. That's not enough regular testing. You want to have a more rapid cadence of testing, more rapid rhythm. You know, I mean, every 2 weeks, every 50% of your employees, every 2 weeks, the testing can be submitted in groups or individually. And the cost of testing is approximately $30 a test. It is entirely possible that this would, because we pay for insurance of our employees, that this would be just done through insurance. We're waiting to see the details, but this is more cost effective than the solutions that the more highly resourced districts have been looking at with other options. And it is less invasive, doesn't require the nasal swab, which can be, you have to have somebody do for you. And it is a easier test on our employees and more rapid. And then it would be reported to employees and CUSD simultaneously. Just so everybody knows, currently we have a symptom checker. Even though our employees, many of them are working at home, we have a symptom checker that we ask and invite and encourage them all to do. I do them every day, and it talks about the symptoms that the California Department of Public Health require of us. And it makes sure that we take our temperature, and if I were to look in my bag over there, I have a digital thermometer I bought, and so I test every day and I give my symptoms, and we will be destroying that data at a regular point. That's our commitment to our employees in case they're worried about that. Just so you know on this too, the law states that we cannot mandate testing for students, but of course we would encourage students to test and families to test. And I know that the city of Half Moon Bay has provided a center, and I believe that they're also using Curative also. And we worked all summer long with the San Mateo County. They were doing Verily testing, and I think they've switched over to Curative testing. So our hope is to have everybody doing symptom checking. That would be something that employees would need to do, particularly if they're reporting on campus, have to do, and that students would have to do. We will have to check symptoms, and that is sort of like the expectation of us, but we will also be testing our employees, and we're just trying to get on this contract. Very appreciative of San Mateo County Office of Education for working with all the districts in this way to provide that less expensive and less invasive option. That's it.
Thank you. And I believe Martha Ladd is next in regards to re-engagement and providing you an update on re-engagement.
Thank you, Leticia, and good evening, everyone. Yes, my part of this presentation is to talk about our re-engagement. And at the district level and at the school level, re-engagement is a tiered and coordinated response to students and families in our distance learning environment. And this slide here shows the slide from our learning continuity and attendance plan. And as all tiers, I wanted to have like a word on tiers. The majority of our students, all of our students, receive tier 1 engagement and outreach. And when a child needs more intensive support, they may receive tier 2 supports. But the important thing to know is that they're also still receiving tier 1. It's additive. And then as they move to, if a child needs tier 3 supports, they're also receiving tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 supports. So it's more additive. And this is why a tiered response can be very effective way of organizing and understanding what students need, but also in it being effective because it has all three components working at one time if a student requires tier 3 supports. Engagement in an in-person setting is access to instruction and learning, as well as social and emotional supports. Oftentimes in schools, in the school setting, we often say Maslow before Bloom, meaning that we have to meet a child's hierarchy of needs before we begin that taxonomy of learning. And if a child has their physiological needs met, their safety and security needs met, belonging and love, then that's when we can begin the teaching piece. And in person, we know we're able to do that. Teaching in person is relational, it's community building, and it's responsive to each individual child's needs. And our teachers hit home runs on that every single day. The challenges that we're looking at is, and we're developing right now, is what does this look like in distance learning? What does engagement and re-engagement look like in distance learning? Next slide, Rosie. So here's our approach. This is what we're doing to help us know what all of our children are doing. And of course, in an in-school setting, we have eyes on our children. And even though in a Zoom class, we still have eyes on our children, it's not a complete picture or as complete a picture as when children are with us in person. So we need to look at different types of data and pull it all together to try and get a picture of each student's narrative to understand what they're doing and understand how we need to respond to them. So this slide basically shows the different ways that we look at data by taking attendance, by looking at completion percentages on Edgenuity, through contact logs. Interestingly enough, calls from families to the front office. We had a little mini training for our admin assistants around understanding that conversations that they had in person now may need to be relayed to the principal or to a cost team, so that because it may be a red flag, it may be a call for help, whereas before it might have been just a conversation. And so these are all the different types of quantitative and qualitative data sources that we've been looking at. Next slide, Rosie.
Before you go, on that cost team, just that Martha mentioned, this is a part of multi-tiered system of supports. You have a coordination of service teams, and that is a multifunctional, multi-person team that involves the administrator, counselor, teacher, psychologist, a number of different people. Martha could explain that better. But just like the other day, I was up at Half Moon Bay High School, barging in, as I do, on John Nazar, and he said, I'm in the middle of a cost team. And I said, I'll be back in a half hour. So the cost team there is called the Cougar Talks. And so if there's a student that identifies or is identified as having some kind of issue, whether it's engagement or some kind of concern or showing some kind of academic issue or social emotional issue, they get identified and the team talks about it and decides what approach and what strategies they can use to connect with them. Martha, did I get that okay?
You did great. A+ for you. All right, next slide, Rosie, please. So this is our action plan. Every week, our data is looked at every week, and all of our schools have detailed spreadsheets on the number of contacts teachers have had with students, principals have had, paraprofessionals, liaisons, and other administrative staff in the school, and then reflecting on that narrative on what is happening and what is needed in the family. And then based on those narratives, we determine a tiered response, and we mobilize school, district, and community resources to address the student's need. So I wanted to give you some real life examples. I had the good fortune to go with Claire Beltrami last week on some home visits, and we visited a student and whose participation in his Zoom classes was inconsistent. So we just wanted to stop by, see how the family was doing, see how he was doing. And we asked him like what was hard about school. And he said, well, he didn't really like reading his books online. And then Claire and I asked him, what kind of books do you like? And he told us the titles of the books. We went back to El Granada. We have a great library there. We checked out some of the titles of the books that he wanted. And the next day we returned to his home to give him the books and knocked on the door, and he opened the door. And he said, oh, it's good to see you. But I'm in class, So our visit had helped him to get into class. But then when I showed him the books that we brought him, his face just lit up and he said, oh, thank you, thank you. Of course, one of the titles was Dog Man, and who doesn't like Dog Man? and he was very excited. But you can see, to me, the benefit, the visit was extraordinary, was very extraordinary and eye-opening for me about how hard our children are working, and that we can't look at a missed Zoom meeting or a turned off camera to mean something that the child doesn't want to attend. There are barriers that we have never seen before, that by going to the home, by making the phone calls, we see what those barriers are and we're able to remove them. We have the talent and the resources to remove those barriers. And so sometimes the cost team will notice that there's a logistical problem. Maybe a child needs a change in the schedule. On another home visit, a mom had 2 children, one in kindergarten, one in first grade, and their meetings were at the same time. So the teachers worked out a way that the children could attend different Zoom meetings at different times so that the mom could support both children. And so our teachers are working at that granular level with families to make sure that there's equitable access within the family and then equitable access to the curriculum. So it's very impressive. There's also sometimes, even at this late date, helping children with logins. How do I get into that program so I can work on it? And then sometimes the question isn't logistical, but it's academic. Does a child need periodic one-on-one support? Do they need access to a learning pod, as Dr. Mateo was mentioning earlier? A learning pod in the model of the Boys and Girls Club is a place where kids can come without home distractions and attend their classes, and have a place where someone could help them if they can't log on, have dependable internet access. But the pod itself isn't instruction, it's just a way to access instruction. And so maybe a child might need access to a learning pod, and then like I described before, maybe a child needs a change in their schedule. And then another level is social emotional. What is going on with a student? I've been thinking really hard on this because I've heard a number of our students say that they like distance learning because they can just get up and turn on their computer and be in their jammies and do their class. But sometimes I wonder if the benefit of school is that you have to get up and splash some water on your face and brush your teeth and put your clothes on and go out and breathe the fresh air to get to school. And then that itself is encouraging and motivating. And that's where these learning pods come in too, is to give a child an opportunity for a routine to go to their school, even though they could just flip open their computer. The other thing about just flipping open your computer is, are they tired? Are they disinterested? Are they feeling mild symptoms of depression? And is not having that to have to resource that energy to go to school affecting their mood, affecting their ability to complete their assignments? And then what are we doing about it? Next slide. So our schools have been doing an amazing job at tiering their support for students. All of our schools have tier 1 responses, spirit weeks, spirit days, crazy close days, other opportunities where kids are connecting in a whole school manner. At the district level, we're looking to create this idea of schools without borders. And we have some events that we want to put together for students and families to sort of bring us all together in the distance learning environment. And I'm super excited about involving our PTOs, involving CEF, involving our community partners, and producing these events that bring our children and our families together. It also involves tiering our home visits. So a home visit, like I described to you earlier, would be like a tier 1 home visit. And then there might be a more serious type of home visit where we really want to check in on a student's well-being, where we might send our schooling services team out to meet with a student, to talk with them, to get an idea for what their needs are. And then, of course, a tier 3 response might be involving our social services connections, as well as Rosalva's team to help with that tier of Maslow needs of making sure that families feel secure and safe, and making sure that they have the things that they need as a family to feel safe and comfortable. And then of course, our goal also is to document our efforts and determine their effectiveness. We have a lot of data that shows how often a child is connecting and how well they're doing in school. And if a child is struggling in that area and we're providing supports, we want to document those supports so that we can match them up to whether or not that's making a change, and that's and that the child is able to access their curriculum, their teacher, their community, their friends more enthusiastically and to better effect. I did check with this other student's teacher before today so that I could report to you that after Ms. Beltrami's visit, he has been more engaged with his learning. So some of these tier 1 visits are just the trick, and sometimes tier 2 and tier 3 are needed. And then the next slide, the last slide. I wish I could have kept it to 2 slides, but not so much. But this is the last slide. And these are our general trends in our data. Our concerns for our students fall into 2 main categories: academics and engagement. And academic concerns are related to assignments completed, regular access to digital programs that they can work on independently. Are they accessing those programs independently, regularly? And then, and also completion rates. You saw on the enrollment slide, we have a significantly higher number of students engaging in their education through independent study. So are their completion rates on track to be completed by the end of the semester? Engagement is related to social and emotional well-being, connection to teachers and staff, and it has been so critical and so easy in in-person setting. And also parents' reports of student well-being and the stability of the family are all part of our student and family engagement piece. We must bring a sense of school and community and caring to our students. Normally they come to us and it's very easy to bring that to them, but now we need to bring our caring and our community to our students where they are at, to help develop, and we are developing really unique solutions to meet their need. And I'm so impressed with our teachers and the ways that they have developed unique solutions to students' needs. I'm so impressed with our principals with the way that they have developed unique solutions to meet our children's needs. And the district now is overlaying that support to our teachers and to our principals, a way of bringing our school to our students. And watch this space for really fun, engaging things that are coming to our community, to lift all of us up, to feel the power of connection that we have lost by having to engage in this way far too many times, and because of the dangers that COVID presents to us. And if you want to wait to the end of the presentation, I'm happy to answer any questions about this section.
I want to take a moment. In my last letter to the community, I wanted to highlight this part of connection. We know teachers are working extra hard to connect with students. We know that support staff, whether that's community liaisons, principals, admin assistants, office managers, working on connecting, right? It's all about connection, whether it's engagement or academically. The other day I went to El Granada to talk to Claire and heard from her staff, oh, she's out doing a home visit with Martha, which I thought was fabulous, and thank you. We're trying to set up a system whereby we can connect. And I want to thank in particular our counselors. At the high school, for example, set up this sort of calming station for students and also for staff. If you need a place to go, you can go to a calming station online and have a place to center and to be mindful and to think and to breathe. I want to say our counselors at the middle school, at the high school doing this, the psychologists doing this. We are so lucky to have them. Our School Link Services, Caroline Morton leading that team, and she's also leading groups, not just for kids, but also for our employees that are anonymous, but that are support, because that's so important for all of us at this point. Behaviorists, everybody. I mean, it's the classroom, it's all these different levels of connection. And I want to thank Martha for helping lead that. And I hope I caught everybody there.
Okay, as we continue now, as we put together on the next slide, the assessment centers with the whole notion of all hands on deck, providing those spaces where we can have them COVID-19 ready and really going to the 4 pillars all implemented with plexiglass. Everybody who has been at the assessment centers and who is going to be part of those has been trained, principals, custodial staff, and always following the San Mateo County Health Department latest. That document that is linked in there is the latest document that has the guides and has the checklist that we do as we put together not only the assessment centers, but everything that we are making COVID ready in the district. The next slide then it gives you an idea of where that Al Granada, this type of setups are beginning to pop up where we get our protection to our testers and protection for our students and their families. Those are beginning to be all over our district. Now, I also want to bring to the board on the next slide to the notion of people wanting to come and using our Cabrillo Unified School District facilities. And we basically are letting them know that due to COVID-19, these facilities are officially closed. However, we are reopening our facilities when there is a COVID-19 safe plan, right, that it is sanctioned by our county council. And when we get the proper protocols, the proper equipment, and that we make sure that those activities that they're going to be engaging on our campuses are safe. So to that end, we have the Mavericks, we have the tennis association, and more many of these groups are coming together. The soccer and the soccer team league, soccer association, and then some of those activities that are also under the umbrella of our partner, the Boys and Girls Club. So there is a system by which we can make sure that our facilities are used in a safe manner. So wanted to bring that to the attention of the board. And then the next slide.
Mr. Contreras, just
Yes.
on that part there on the slide before, even today, we had a facility use request that came to us from an outside agency. I was able to turn that around to county council, and at 6:30 p.m. they were providing some information for this outside agency who want to use one of our facilities for a great concern that would be great for the community. This is not easy. There are California Department of Public Health industry guidelines that have to be checked, and we always refer to county council to make sure that that's okay. So whether it's Half Moon Bay High School Athletics, whether it's been the Boys and Girls Club, whether it's been any partner, the Lori Malliot and the El Granada Dolphin Club, that requires a lot of work to be able to develop a protocol that we can then share with county council to say, does this work? And I'm kind of a compliance nut on this because I want to make sure that we're safe. So I just want to let people know, when we hear people want to use the facilities, we're not just shutting it down. We're saying that's fine. How do we keep them safe? But it does take some time. County council, I've got to thank Lisa Cho, our deputy county council, who is just gotten so many requests from us in the last 3 months. And so I thank her for letting our facilities be used safely and compliantly. And that it just takes a little bit of time for us to tweak that and then figure out which agency we're talking to. So we'll continue to work on that to slowly open gradually as needed so we can, provide some people some use of our facilities.
And on the next slide, I just want to inform you that we had on September 30th, our first school finance office hours that we had a theme discussion, and this is informal way in which we can open to the ideas and from our community and stakeholders so that we can promote transparency and then provide the information that it is needed to build the trust and transparency rooted for our stakeholders. Those are the dates that we're going to be gathering that group from 4 to 6 p.m. And it's informal, as I said. And then on our website now, there is the invitation for a formal budget committee that is going to be convening 5 times throughout the year, where we can go into in-depth discussions and then look into the efficiency, to improve the efficiency of our operations. So those 2 groups are going to be convening throughout the year on those dates.
And not only is it on our website, but Mr. Contreras will be sending a copy of that application. It's in English and in Spanish to serve on the budget committee. And he will be sending that out so we can get wide representation for those committees to help us. And this is part of what we're trying to do, to comb the budget and to look at our needs, all our needs, and really sort of share with people sort of those, you know, that information that people want. And that although we present at board meetings over and over again, so many times to this board in the last year, budget items, we continue to, I really thank Mr. Contreras for leading those committees.
Okay. And I want to finish my slides with on a high note on the next slide. I just want to inform the board that the ERAF resolution came through and that we will have the funds to pay the TRAN, the 15 million TRAN that we borrowed not too long ago. So that was resolved, and those $14.4 million have been transferred to us. That's a breather. We really feel happy that this came through and that we will have the funds to pay for the loan that we had taken.
And just so that people who haven't been following the bouncing ball on this, San Mateo County and a couple other Bay Area counties got caught up, not because of the district, but because of the counties and the state and their determination about how these ERAF, educational revenue allocation funding, or I don't know what the acronym is. This is a hard one, and it doesn't really mean what it means. But basically, the county has money that they were supposed to give us, and the state and the county fought on how that was being allocated. And so this is very good news for us. We did get caught short in the spring, and we're told that we would have to take a loan. We did have to pay interest on that loan. We hope that educational funding will become better over time, but this was one where it was no fault of Cabrillo Unified. It impacted many of us, and that ERAF shortfall then made us take a loan, and we had to pay interest on that loan. And it's also part of just the county and the state fight over that funding allocation.
Well, that is the end of this presentation. Next slide, I think, is questions.
So they didn't end up paying us the interest back from that slide. I thought they
paid
reimbursed.
They paid us the interest that regarding those 2 sums of the 10 million. If you want to go back to the slide, see the interest that they paid us. They owed us the one on the left. They give us that interest, and that is the total amount on the rightmost column.
Oh, so they didn't pay us the total amount, 14,473,000. They only paid us they didn't pay us the interest.
They did pay us the interest.
Oh, they did.
If you add those 2 columns, that they give us the interest.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood this, Jesus. Then we were made whole.
They paid us the interest on what they on that for them holding those dollars for that time. On our TRAN, we will pay interest on the loan that we took. We will pay that interest.
So it's two different interests that we're talking about.
Two different interests.
Yeah, yes. It's not the interest on the loan, which is what you were talking about, Sean. It's the interest on what we would have accrued by having that money in the bank, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Good question, Mary Beth.
Okay. And
Yes,
when will we get that payment? What's the timeline?
We just received it last week.
Oh, okay.
Very good news.
That's high note, high note, high note.
One of our two big loans paid off now, I guess.
Right.
Nice. So I would, Rosie, if you can go back to the beginning where we summarized what we're actually being asked to approve from the earliest part of the presentation.
Do you want to do a motion to approve, Kim?
Yeah, I want to get back to this first so everybody can see it. And then I am going to ask for that motion. Right there. Okay, thank you. So the motion before us is to approve of the new recommendations from our update on opening of schools plan. Do I have a motion? We'll have discussion also, but do I have a motion to approve this plan?
So moved.
Thank you, Sophia. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you so much, Lisette. I think I was able to summarize this earlier, but Freya, I know you had questions. Does the plan as we see it now make sense?
Well, it makes sense how we're moving forward. That Leticia and her team will be working on this plan that they'll submit to do the modified phase 2, the phase 1.5. I guess I would like to see that plan, and I don't know how the other board members feel about it. And I don't want to see it just for me. I think it's an important, as Sean was just saying, we are building this plane as we fly it, and I get the time constraints around all of that. But I also think that public viewing of the plan, of the actual details of how the classrooms are going to be set up, how the schedules are going to be working with the safety, with the cleaning, with other kinds of things. I think, especially since we're setting ourselves up for the hybrid returning sometime in January when the phase opens up, I feel like that this is an important time for us all to see that and have that be open to the public and to our community, so that they really show that we can show that this is what we're doing. So I don't know at what point that makes sense, but I would like to put that out there for, I think that's a really important part of this process.
In response to that, I think, Leticia, don't we have to, before they'll approve it, it has to be up on our website, I think I heard on the.
Yes, it has to be up on the website. That is correct. Everything has to be up on the website. If it's not on the website, they won't approve.
They're using the website to look at the plan to decide if they're going to approve it. Like there's some initial paperwork. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how they're approving it, right?
Yes, and we have our opening of schools steering committee on the 15th, and I'd like to bring a draft to our steering committee on the 15th. Mm-hmm. And then what we've done before, like with the LCAP, even with the new LCAP, the learning continuity and attendance plan, we didn't really have a meeting, but we did have kind of like public, like we posted it, we sent an email saying, here it is, it's open for public viewing. And we can get input that way if the board would like. We are asking our, like what occurred. I mean, our steering committee has done such an amazing job. I mean, we started with the steering committee as, we present information, and then all the different stakeholders, CUTA, CSEA, PTOs, DLAC, they go back to their constituency groups to present what we gave them. So the information will be sent out to our community through the steering committee. And I don't know, Martha, I mean, I'm always one that I always say, yes, we could do it. And most of the time we can. So I think we can probably by the 15th, when we meet with the steering committee, maybe a few days before, give them a draft, and then have also the steering committee give us input on how we can send it to our families. I mean, most of this has already, I would probably have to guess right now that 70% of the information is already in the handbooks we presented. The COVID-19 handbook that Jason Owens and the team presented with Susan on the protocols. The other piece is with our opening of school steering. So I know the information is there. It's just putting pieces of the puzzle together and actually setting up the physical classroom the way that Jesus showed with our assessment spaces. Now we'd have to do the same thing for our SPED classes for students with disabilities, and determine a space. And Martha and I, we already have a date on the calendar to walk through schools and determine spaces that are well ventilated, where we can put at least 10 students spaced apart. And then we'll have to talk to, yes, so there will be a process, but I think we can do that.
I'm just looking at the next board meeting as being November 12th. So I'm wondering if we could, because this is about transparency, we would have to post it on our website. We will be working with the Opening School Steering Committee. If we can inform the board what decisions the steering committee help us form, and we report on consultation with employees, if we could bring that to the staff and bring that to the team and bring that to the community. And then if need be, you could have a special board meeting, Freya or Kim, we could agendize that for Freya's concerns. Conversely, you could give us the approval to do this and inform you if we get approval from the county to go forth with some smaller groups and then bring an update November 12th. That's two options.
So realizing there's rigor with the county, yes, I'm interested certainly in how this is being implemented, but knowing how complex just getting all of these plans together, my sense of timing, and correct me, Leticia, is that as soon as you can get this application together, you want to put it in. And so you would probably want that plan for the phase 2, if it's for your small group, you want that plan in place earlier than our next board meeting.
Yes, that is correct.
So Freya, are you wanting to actually have the board approve it before the application goes in?
Well, I'm assuming that there's going to be some give and take with the county in terms of the plan. I know there isn't with the LCAP, for example. You often give it to them beforehand, and then they say, oh, we need this done and this done, and so we approve a final version. I just think that at some point in that process, we should all see the plan, and that we should have some period of time for public comment and that transparency that we're talking about. So I'm not saying we have to have it at a certain time, or that there's kind of this approval maybe before you submit, but maybe before it's actually implemented. I would personally feel more comfortable, given that, although I believe very strongly that these promised students should come back soon, I also recognize that they have significant risk factors oftentimes. And I want to, as a board trustee, make sure that I'm doing my due diligence as a board with the community to make sure that the safety stuff that is there makes sense to everybody, and that there has been that proper input, all of that. So I guess I would like some point in there where we understand what the process has been, because I understand, Leticia, you just learned, and totally, I get that, again, we're building this plane as we're moving, but that would be what I would prefer, is to have at some point some presentation before the kids are actually back in these pods at school to say, look, this is how we're doing it. And I think that personally, I think having a meeting where you're organized and saying it versus just having it posted on a website, I think that says something different for the community. That's just my view on it. So I would be happy to have a short special board meeting if it was sooner or that we needed to have that. Sounds like we don't really know yet, because we don't yet know how long the county is going to need to provide some input. So I think it's something that we could, if we're all okay having something like that. Again, it's not to micromanage or to say no to something. It's so that we have that process of community input, kind of community check that is, I understand there's other parts. There's the steering committee and there is on the website, but I just feel like that this is, for me, that would feel important just given the fact that this is also new.
Yeah. Point of order, just a moment. Do we have a motion to go past 10 o'clock?
So moved.
Thank you, Freya. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Lizette. Aye. Lizette?
Aye.
Mary Beth?
Aye.
Freya?
Aye.
Sophia?
Aye.
Caroline?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 5+1.
If I may,
Yes.
can I recommend and can I ask the board and particularly Member McCammett, could we work on the, it's not a waiver, it's a plan. Could we work on the submission of the plan and get it ready to submit to the county and wait for their go ahead and then have the special board meeting at that time? Because we don't want to bring you a plan if the county's going to say no to it anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that would be fine. I just think before we start bringing students back, there should be a period of time where it's not just about educating all of us, it's about educating the whole community and answering questions if people have them, or allowing them to make comments about it, et cetera. And so it's just that, I think that would be a nice thing to do, given that this is also new and we're setting the stage for whenever the hybrid comes back. It's just my feeling on it.
So I would just say, if you would approve this recommendation, knowing that when it says submit waiver or submit plan, we would do that and we would get the county response. And if they told us, no, go back to, you need to do this, we wouldn't wait. We would wait to have a special board meeting until it's time as the county says go, then we'd bring it back to you and we'd be able to explain it to you and the public.
I would feel good about that, yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Well,
And
we serve at the pleasure of
I looked at the Hillsborough approved plan. It is our handbook, basically. The handbook that we wrote, that's 60 pages. It is 80% of that. And so I think it could even be sooner. I need to connect with Martha, and then we will communicate with Dr. McFetridge to see when. And so if it's okay, so I understand, Martha and I will write the plan, we'll present it on the 15th to our steering committee, giving them a few days beforehand to review it. And then we will, with the input of our steering committee, we would send it to our San Mateo County friends. And then once they approve it, then we would talk to Dr. McFetridge, and then he would reach out to you to schedule a special board meeting.
And for the members of the public who wonder why it takes so long for a state and local bureaucracy and agency to do things, the answer is health and safety and levels of control from your board as your locally democratically elected representatives working with other agencies. We are trying to do everything we can to make sure that we have a bona fide go ahead from the county and from the board and from our opening school steering committee, which represents the community also, both employees and families. And so I just want to put that in context. We're not trying to make this hard. This is hard, and democracy is what do they say? It's not a spectator sport. It's a contact sport. It's a participatory action. So I think what we hear is we're asking you to approve this recommendation with the caveat that we will submit the waiver, not the waiver, the plan. We'll get approval from the county, and once we do, we will bring it back for another meeting for your go ahead. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That makes sense to me. I had a number of questions on the recommendations, and I'm sorry, I missed if we did a motion to approve already, if we should wait for that.
We did, yes, we did the motion.
Okay. Sorry, I missed that with all the questions. So a couple questions on this, Leticia or Sean. One is just to make sure I understand. So are we having a phase 2 as well, or is this phase 1.5? Like, explain to me or us the modified phase 2 1.5 thing. Like, why is this not just phase 2?
As I understand it, because we're now in the red, the state allows us to bring small groups back without submitting a waiver, but we have to have a plan. So Leticia, can you explain the difference between 1.5?
Yes, so basically, in the previous phase 1, we would have planned to bring back all of our EL students, 100, like all of the students with disabilities, all of our English learners. At this time, we want to make sure that we also are thoughtful and respect our staff that may not feel comfortable to return to school, which may include staff that works with our special education students with disabilities, staff that serves our English learner students. So that's the modification. And so there will not right now with this, it's just a modified. So maybe we shouldn't have called it one. It's a modified phase 2. It's not a 1.5.
Okay, got it. So basically means like phase 2 originally was defined as all English learners and all special education. So we're basically saying it's a modified phase 2 because we're modifying phase 2 basically. So we're bringing a subset of those because of resource constraints.
And not only, because I also want to mention, I had such a great meeting with our amazing secondary ELD teachers today. And they brought up a very good point that, as we all know, that some students who may not have been as successful in in-person instruction are being super successful in remote learning. So there are EL students after my meeting today with our ELD teachers in secondary who are already successful. And we are not going to target that student that was original phase 2. If it's working for them, then let it work for them. And sometimes, as we all know, I mean, it probably happened to some of us. Sometimes we have to care for our little siblings, our younger siblings. So pulling that middle or high school EL, then it's going to create a need in that family. And so we want to we'll be working, Martha, together in looking at the students at the re-engagement and looking at which students from our EL and special ed classes are not engaging and start to bring those. We're going to take very small steps. And as, I mean, we've all mentioned this, that we're moving together. We will never make a decision and without with the input and consultation of our groups. And we want to move and make sure that we listen, that we meet somewhere in the middle. And ultimately, we want to serve our students that are not engaging at this point, because we don't know how long we'll be in this situation. So hence the modified phase 2. But logistically, I don't believe that we will be able to implement the original phase 2 that we proposed because of all of these different layers of complexity.
That makes a lot of sense. And then phase 3 would be you'd be phasing in by grade level, but as you said, like over a relatively short course of time, because if you go 3 weeks for every grade level, it's going to be like June by the time you get to our seniors, and they'll be graduating. So I guess as you come back with the fuller plan for the hybrid learning model, we'll have that kind of detail in terms of like what's the schedule for phasing in, so you can get 12 grades, appropriately spaced out, but also, maybe like each school can handle their earlier grades in parallel, for example, so it can also be efficient about it.
Yes, those are conversations that we have. Some of our educators have also mentioned that it might even be even more critical to bring in first grade, because that's where reading happens, and then bringing kinder, or maybe bring in TKK in one if we have the capacity. But again, what we heard in as cabinet participating in the meeting on Monday is that we just want to be strategic, and it's better to go slow than to go fast. And they're recommending they said 3 weeks, but maybe 2 weeks, but Nancy said about 3 weeks in between bringing in groups to serve.
And just so everyone knows, in the phases, most districts are doing it with the younger kids first. But I also want to talk about students who have needs such as our special day classes. I know Martha would be able to speak to this better, but these are students who have needs, and if we could bring them back. But you know, we're gonna try to phase this so that it's just a little bit at a time, and we can take baby steps toward bringing more and more on.
So can I just ask also that the plan include some kind of monitoring, and I guess maybe on 2 levels. One is on kind of the safety protocols and how that's working, how it's being followed again, because we'll have to then implement that later, but also the monitoring of the engagement and the social and emotional well-being, because even though we have this idea that bringing them there is going to be good for them, it is also going to be hard. They're going to be physically distanced. They're going to be wearing masks still primarily. I know from talking to teachers who've taught those situations, it's not as simple as teaching in the old way, right? So I just want us to make sure that we're also aware of that issue, that there might be it might work or it might not. Like, I think I'm sure we're going to have to be adjusting as we go, but I just wanted the monitoring to be incorporated into the plan.
I think that's a very important point, and the best assessment you can ever have is looking the teacher in the eye and saying, how's it going, right? Or or talking to the family and saying how it's going. So I think that's a very important point. I do want to point out that Los Listos, our preschool, has started back. And if anybody questioned the idea of these little kids being able to wear masks, they're all very accustomed and comfortable wearing masks. I saw Rosalba Segura and Graciela Kravenschmidt this week, and Leticia could speak to this, but Los Listos is back and in person and doing the stuff, and they're adjusting. So I think there's an aspect of this where we're nervous. Understandably, families and employees would be nervous, but I do think that's an important point, that we have to check in on how they're doing.
Yes, and even we have the summer example of Big Lift. We didn't participate because we just didn't feel we were ready, but we have districts that successfully implemented K-3 summer school, and with very positive reviews from parents, from students. Yeah. And
our
so,
families
yes, and Priya?
Our families indicated some discomfort, which is why we and a few other districts didn't do that. And we were recently talking to other districts about Big Lift and how we kind of wish we'd done it, but quite frankly, the families didn't feel comfortable. So, you know, I think we're trying to take this slow and steady.
Yes, and thank you for saying that, Sean, because in our DLAC, you said you were, I wasn't in your breakout group, I was leading a different breakout group. At least in my breakout group, and Rosalba did tell me that some parents, about 50% of the parents were not comfortable returning. So we also want to give that option, and that's what we were talking today with our ELD secondary team, is that we will definitely talk to the parent and talk to the child. Is this something that you'd be interested in? Because if the child feels that they won't be successful in person, then we wouldn't want to. But then we have our students who crave that social connection with people and would right away say, yes, I would come back if given the opportunity. And so we definitely will build that in. And part of the plan that the county is asking, there is a section on how we are going to address and measure social emotional well-being, Freya. So we will definitely include that as part of the plan, because the county is expecting us to write a section on that.
I just want to also say, when you hear DLAC, that's the District English Language Advisory Committee. And I want to credit Leticia and Rosalva and others who have worked on with that committee to get more membership, to get more attendance, to really understand what English language learners are feeling, and then to include them in part of the opening school steering committee, to see that you have an opening school steering committee on one side and that there's an extra outreach for our DLAC group as a representative of that group, or the Latino roundtable that's emerging. I just want to credit Leticia and Josefina and Rosalva and others who have really worked to bring people in and try to get more sense from them also.
Thanks. Couple of points. I know we put a lot of presentations in here in addition to just the plan of doing the application and how we're going to monitor all of this. But I want to appreciate Martha's presentation. You so encapsulated all the questions I think we had last month in terms of not just metrics, but how we're engaging with families and how we're making sure that there's some safety nets in place. So thank you for the conversation pieces and showing how all of this is integrated. I think that's really important. And that piece is what gives me the confidence to know that we're going to be addressing what Freya's concerns were in getting kids back in small groups and having that awareness of all of the pieces. The other piece that I wanted to comment on was the demographics and seeing us below 3,000 for the first time, I think, in 20 years, 2933, and knowing we're in declining enrollment. We're just going to have to pay attention to this whole ecosystem and look at what that means for the decisions we make.
I think that's an important point to bring up. We know the demographer reported that in 5 years will be fewer than 1,100 elementary school students. We knew that COVID would have an impact on enrollment. It's having an impact on enrollment up and down the state, throughout the county. I think that is an important thing for us to keep an eye on as we look to serve students, as we look to how we open facilities, run facilities, and maintain the schools we need and the facilities that we need to provide. That may change our plans, right? We've had the architects go back to talk about, well, what does this look like if with the new demographers numbers? And I think that's important. I also want to just say thank you for giving credit to Martha. And just to say I want to give credit to Martha and her team, to Leticia, to Jesus. I know that they've been working with people to try to make sure that the facilities are safe to go back into. And I just want to thank also the board in the last board meeting sort of said, hey, we want to know more about this. We want to know more about this. We want to know more about this. And tonight's presentation, as long and thorough as it is, we think that we're trying to do our due diligence by the board and the public and by our employees and by us to say, this is the information that you need for us to make these decisions.
I just wanted to, oh yeah, I want to reiterate that thank you too. And that's, I know we got dove right into questions, but I want to acknowledge all the amazing collaboration and work that it's taken to continue to plan in this rapidly changing environment. And also to be able to execute on plans as we plan for the longer term future as well. And it's just been great throughout this evening to hear the many examples of teachers adjusting meetings for students and family so that they can both be on and the mom can supervise them both. Teacher calling to check on a student after a difficult meeting, that example Brianna mentioned earlier. The collaboration with Mr. Santoni at the high school, Jaime, Jesus, exploring those outdoor spaces and how we can get those ready. District staff, Jesus and his team preparing for ventilation systems and all the IT work that Sean described on behalf of Randy. It's like a bunch of bullet points, but there's so much to all of that work that's so essential. Wasn't mentioned explicitly tonight, but I know our food services department has also been bending over backwards to get creative and collaborate with partners in our community to make sure our students aren't hungry. To Martha's point about Maslow before Bloom, that's super critical. So to just see everyone kind of stepping up and doing that, at a time where we're still kind of planning for the longer term is just astonishing. And I'm so grateful for that. And we're really lucky as a community that, that we're all doing that. And it takes everybody to come and step together. I also want to acknowledge San Mateo County Office of Education, as Sean described that program with the testing. We'd be hard pressed to move forward, and we probably wouldn't get approval to move forward without some kind of testing. To have their support in establishing an infrastructure, we can do that. Most likely free to or low cost to us, because we should have that insurance coverage in place. Is really exciting. And so it's a great program to have that. And I also want to say special thank you to Martha as well for just sharing with us so much of like the logistics, but also and the analyses that are being done, but also the important point about empathy for cameras that might be turned off or kids that aren't showing up to their Zoom, and how we really do have what it takes to help kids remove those barriers, be they logistical and emotional. To a great extent, maybe not entirely. There are definitely things out of our control, but to be able to bring education to our students at this time is really critical. And I can say I think the approach makes sense of the slow and steady. We've kind of like taken that approach from the beginning, allows careful planning to make sure we can implement those 4 pillars, prioritizing small groups, and that's important from an equity perspective, making sure we have that system set up to do the regular COVID-19 screenings for our employees, making sure we can prepare our physical spaces again with ventilation. Thank you for the bond, which is allowing us to do that ASAP, and we don't have to wait for state funding to come in for that, which is great, at least for the assessment phase. Maybe it'll come in time to do some of the work, but we'll see about that. Certainly the priority is just getting it done. Outdoor learning also, so I think going to be a good opportunity. And to many of the examples you guys raised about, we have experience now at Los Listos. We're getting experience through Dolphin Club. We have a close connection as board members, as district staff, as principals, and others with other school districts that are starting to open and can learn from them. Local private schools, the Big Lift program over the summer. California Department of Public Health is looking at this data, as are the county, to be sure. I just do want to add one asterisk to the specific recommendations, though. And to me, waiting until orange makes sense. And I think, given how the trends are looking in San Mateo County, and now with this major development, not only for our school districts, but across the county, and the capacity is basically like well beyond the demand at this point for testing. I'm hopeful that we can hopefully, reaching orange as a county by January 18th or 19th seems relatively feasible. I would just put an asterisk around, and there was mentioned too, a metric of Half Moon Bay's status as being orange as well. To the best of my knowledge, that's not currently being tracked. If there's a proxy that we can say kind of like, and just note that to be in consultation with San Mateo County Public Health, to say like our metrics aren't that different than the county's metrics, for example. I just want to make sure it's clear. To my knowledge, that's not a level of detail that's being tracked right now. So we'll just need to.
Maybe we should have rewritten, Sophia, you are right. Basically, it needs to be comparable. There is a you don't track the color, but there is a way to compare the cases by
the number of cases, total number of cases over the whole time. So that number, of course, it's only ever going to go up. You're never going to like remove historical cases. So if we had a denominator for that, but it's still that's a cumulative rate, not a like week by week rate, which is what the blueprint is counting. So I think you're right, Leticia. If we can kind of more clearly define that as like, based upon consultation with San Mateo County Health, like they can be able to tell us to say, qualitatively speaking, your rates on those 3 measures that are part of the blueprint, which is the case rate, your test positivity rate, and they're adding now that equity rate. If they can consult us and say, qualitatively speaking, you're fine, which right now is the case. Pescadero was going up for a little bit, but so far the coast side has been pretty comparable, then I'd be comfortable with that. So I just want to
so maybe
clarify that little nuance.
So maybe we can improve with that not the local data just needs to be comparable to county data cases. Sorry.
for those 3 measures that they're looking at
For the 3 measures.
Yeah,
not
and
one.
that might just be kind of
Yeah.
an informal consult with public health to just make sure that we probably won't have those hard data. I'm guessing maybe we will, but certainly not at the school district level. Like, I just don't see them doing that.
Yeah.
Um,
I think let's let Leticia work with that. I think those are really good observations, Sophia. And I'd also like to try to get us out of here by about 10:30, knowing that we have one more presentation. With your caveat, Sophia, are we ready? Are you ready to vote? Or do we have any other inputs?
Well, I think this is important, so I do have a couple other comments. I appreciate Kim. I realize it's getting late, but
That has to. I know we have other people that need to get up early in the morning, so if you've got other substantial comments or questions that impact the plan, please offer those.
I think it's pretty important. I think that we make sure that throughout this process that we're, let's just step back for a minute and realizing what this plan is, that it is looking at holding our students, having our students for the most part, except for these small groups, being remote for 3 more months. And I just want to make sure we step back, and I'm comfortable with that for all the reasons that we've discussed so far. But I want to make sure that we realize our students will be home for 10 months for the most part. And when they come back, they're only going to be back really limited time. And I think that's the unfortunate reality of the situation. But I just want to ask that as a board, as a district, the opening of schools committee, as school task forces, as any individual involved in the school committee, that we recognize that and make sure that, from my view, and I think this gets back to Mary Beth's point about like having a goal and mission, and Sean kind of alluded to kind of the priority right now being health and safety, including mental health and emotional safety. I think, it's easy to get tied up in like all the academics of what we would normally demand of our students and our employees to give to our students in a normal circumstance, but this is not a normal circumstance. So I just want to make sure that we are careful around, and maybe even consider having some guiding principles that the steering committee comes up with in terms of making that a priority explicitly, or things like trying to reduce the administrative burden in our students at this time when they're like managing a lot of stuff at home, on their own. This idea of that we're bringing our education to students, and that things like that we might want to do. Somebody mentioned it earlier, I think it was Freya, and I agree really strongly with this is, also, and probably it's on Martha, your radar as well already, but having some regular screening for mental health, I think is something we ought to look into. Just as a standard thing, when you go to a pediatrician, you get a mental health screener, to just have something regularly in place that we can monitor and detect what might not be obvious in a Zoom call or from the data that we're looking at, but might help us detect individual issues, but also longitudinally the trends that we're seeing in our students. And we can monitor then kids starting going back to hybrid. Does it get generally better, or does it get, does it not? So I just want to put in a plug for having some kind of check-in, irregular check-in structure for that, but also a check-in also with our families and our students on how is it going with distance learning? Because again, we're going to be having 3 more months of it for most of our students. And our families are our partners now in delivering education to our students, supervising that education at home.
Sophia, could I suggest that maybe those pieces we address next month and maybe frame for some of that feedback? Because I think we're starting to go beyond approving this plan.
That's fine, but I'm approving this plan contingent on having some preparation for 3 months coming forward. So that's why I think this is important, is I don't want to wait a month and then say, okay, here's some ideas, and it takes another month to do. And by then we're coming back to school after the holidays. So that's my point.
So I think it's an important point. I think it ties in to the transparency piece that Freya talked about. I think this piece that you're talking about doing more surveys, I think is important, The survey data was really powerful. So what I would suggest on the guiding principles is Leticia, Dr. Bhatia, Martha, the team, we will work on the guiding principles that we had in the handbook. And we will make sure that mental, social, emotional wellness and mental health are integrated in that when we make the plan to the county. And when we bring this back to the board, we will come with a plan about how we're going to prepare a survey, working maybe with Caroline or psychologists or what have you, Martha. We can figure out how to survey families and students about how they're feeling. And so we'll bring that back, and I think that's good direction. And I think we know as staff how to move that forward.
Great. Thank you, Sean.
Well, thanks to Leticia and Martha, because I just added work for them.
Thank you, Leticia and Martha.
Can I just add one more thing? And again, maybe this is already going to be in there. And I understand our testing for our staff members, and we're working on that. But I do also, we have to be prepared for there to be clusters and for students to potentially need to get tested. And it is, even though there's much more capacity in the county, it is still difficult having only one day of testing on the coast a week. So if someone came down on Wednesday, they have to wait till the following Tuesday, and then it takes 3 or 4 days. I mean, that test is basically not valid at that point. So I don't know what the solution is, but maybe if, I know we can't mandate that they do it, but maybe there's some way with our contract providing some other way if there are hotspots. And I think we need to think about that when we're talking about bringing kids back together, period, where there could be outbreaks. And the idea, it's super stressful. I just went through a whole period of trying to find tests, and it took me forever, and I had to drive 4 hours round trip, and not everybody can do that. And so I think we need to be conscious of that, especially given the population that we're bringing back. So that would just, and again, I'm not saying it has to be in a particular way, but, and maybe it's already a part of there. I wanted to bring that.
So I have to answer now. So I want everyone to know that in the spring, I was contacted by a company named Kinza that provides free thermometers, digital thermometers to families. Susan has worked with them. Families will get thermometers. We will continue to do symptom checking, which is kind of the normal protocol. But to your point, Freya, we will certainly look if Curative has a solution that we can provide to families that want to test. I don't know how we would resource that, but we can look at it, and maybe we could partner with the city since they're working with Curative too. We'll figure out if the county has got an option.
Well, I will say I'm thrilled that we're putting so much emphasis on safety and doing this methodically and thoughtfully and not rushing it. My sister-in-law teaches in Arizona, and she goes back to full classrooms, everybody in a mask, but full classroom middle school teaching in Arizona on Monday. So we are actually, I think, I'm very appreciative of how thoughtful this community is in working in this environment. Can we go to vote now? Lizette? And this is on your plan. Thank you, Lizette.
Aye.
Did you see me? Did you say me? I didn't hear.
Yeah, Mary Beth.
Aye. Sorry. Aye.
Sorry, Sophia?
Aye.
Freya?
Aye.
Aye for me. Caroline?
Aye.
Motion passes 5+1. This brings us to, and again, thank you for all the hard work, everyone. This brings us to an information point, which is update on the Cabrillo Unified School District solar project.
Oh, I want to apologize in advance, I'm apologizing again to Sizer Co. folks, and I know Rosie will be bringing Gabe Johnson over because we've left them to the end of a meeting again. So I apologize to Sizer Co. To give context to this for the public, we've had PG&E outages, PSPS outages. We talked about this last year. This time we had PSPS outages. We know that there are power outages. We know that we have a commitment to sustainability, both operationally and environmentally and financially. And we've been talking to the board about what we can do toward those ends, the triple bottom line, good for the planet, good for our people, good for our prosperity and the organization. And so Gabe Johnson is here tonight to present, and Rosie will pull forward this PowerPoint. And this is a very high level, sort of explanation of what they've been looking at about solar generation and solar storage as part of resiliency, cost savings, sustainability, and all that good stuff. Thanks, Gabe.
Thank you, Dr. McFedridge. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, members of the board. Good evening, Mr. Contreras. I'm looking at the screen here with the presentation, and I'm not sure if you can see my mouse or not. Should I do verbally if I want to point something out, or can you see my mouse moving around?
I can see the mouse.
Okay, sounds good. Next slide, please.
That was my mouse. I will need to give you access to the controls. You want me to control it, or you prefer to control it yourself?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I can take over. Okay, as Dr. McFetridge says, we're here to provide an update on the progress we've made to date and basically where we're headed from here as it pertains to the energy efficiency, solar PV, battery storage, and potentially EV charging scopes of work that we've been discussing. When we first started this about middle of last year, we highlighted some of the benefits that would come from a comprehensive energy conservation and power generation project. And I think the thing to note here is, in addition to all of the environmental benefits that these projects provide to this district and other districts, in terms of greenhouse gas reduction, improving the learning spaces with the students, it's also a really good opportunity to reduce operating costs. And as the costs of electricity and natural gas continue to go up at a rapid rate, investing in these types of technologies can bring big financial benefits to the district. So our goal from day one was to try to be as conscious as we could and as efficient as possible to maximize the amount of savings that we can bring to the district while bringing along many of those other fringe benefits that come with the project. Next slide, please.
Gabe, do you have the controls?
Let's see here. Clicking on page down, it doesn't seem to be moving here. Okay, can you all see this? Game plan?
No,
Rosie may need to put them back up.
Yeah, I think that might be easier if you take control back over, Rosie. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So the overarching game plan and our intention here was, to shrink it's always more cost effective to try to reduce your energy load first before you focus on offsetting the energy consumption with solar PV. And so our motivation by fast tracking towards the energy efficiency side of things was to produce as much energy efficiency as possible to reduce that load for the district, and also at the same time address some of the infrastructure needs that we had identified in different locations. And so the project that we're involved in now, the energy efficiency project, is addressing those first two bullet points here. And the next three items, solar PV, creating grid independence, resiliency through battery storage and EV charging stations, those are the scopes of work that our team is currently in what we call project development. So the energy efficiency you could think of it as a phase one, and the renewable energy, resiliency, and charging stations is a phase two. And so we're in the construction phase of the phase one, and we're in the project development phase of phase two, which means that we're working on scopes, costs, budgets, savings, things like that. Next slide, please. So just a reminder, a little bit about the background, and I just kind of said this, but back in November 2019 is when we were basically engaged by the district to put together the energy efficiency plan. We were approved in May to begin the construction for that project. We've been actively involved in implementing those measures. I would say we're more than 50% through as far as progress goes at this point. And at the same time, while we're moving through the implementation of the energy efficiency measures, we're also working to develop the solar storage and charging stations. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick highlight of what, and a reminder actually of what that energy efficiency project involves that we're basically in the middle of. Some of the measures as far as the scope of work are shown here on the left. And getting back to the financial benefits of the district, this project, we'd estimated, well, there'll be a measurement and verification process when we get through the end of the project to validate the savings. But it's projected to save nearly $180,000 a year for the district, just under a 10-year payback. And when you take that cash flow out over 20 years with a 4% utility escalation, it should net the district about $5.7 million in overall savings. Next slide, please. And so the second phase, which is what we're developing here, the focus here is like I said, solar PV, storage, and charging stations. When you see resiliency on some of these slides, what we mean by resiliency is the ability for the district to be independent of the power that's being supplied through PG&E, and the ability to have backup power to keep the facilities and the critical systems operating during those times when there's PSPS shutdowns. So when we get to the next few slides, I'll show you what some of the preliminary layouts look like for where we think the solar PV systems will be physically located. I wanted to touch on some money that may be available to the district as it pertains to the battery storage and the EV charging stations. There's a program available through the California Public Utility Commission called SGIP, Self-Generation Incentive Program. And that program is designed to incentivize battery storage systems for grid resiliency. And Half Moon Bay is in a bit of a unique situation because they have different criteria under SGIP. And if you're in what they call a high fire zone, or an area where you've had 2 or more PSPS shutdowns last year, over the course of the last 2 years actually, then the incentive goes up higher than just a regular incentive. So the district is in a unique position to capture more funding through the SGIP grant program. And right now, from a preliminary look, it appears that we may be able to offset about 60, 70, maybe 75% of the cost of those storage systems. So we're in the process right now of putting together costs and speaking with the administrative staff at the district to identify potential locations and sizing of systems and uses for the systems. So we don't have all that data here at this point in time, but just wanted to give an update, just kind of on where we're at from a progress standpoint. And then the Cali VIP program is a incentive program through the California Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program that is there's a window of opportunity coming up in December where we'll be able to apply on behalf of the district to try to get incentive dollars to offset those costs of EV charging stations. And I'll show some pictures a little bit later, but the incentives can potentially be very lucrative to pay for, more than half, and potentially, again, maybe 60, 70% of those costs for the EV charging stations. So the concept here is to identify the locations within the district that make the most sense to install this combination of solar, storage, and charging. And through a lot of iterative process, going back and forth and having some conversations, we ultimately have landed at the high school, Cunha, and then we're calling it the district office, Hatch, and Pilarcitos as a third potential location for these types of systems. Just to explain the DO Hatch Pilarcitos line, what we can do there is, because all 3 of those facilities are a contiguous property, because they're all basically connected without any public roads that go through, Pilarcitos and the district office are served by a single electrical meter. What that allows us to do through the rules of PG&E with solar is we can build one solar system at any location between those 3 sites and offset the usage for all 3 of those sites as if it were one site in itself. So when we looked around at some of the other sites, El Granada and Farallon View are still kind of in flux in terms of the certainty of the future. I know there's a lot of planning at those sites. And so we decided to wait on those sites until the future looked a little bit more clear. And then we also looked at Kings Mountain, but the energy load at Kings Mountain is quite low, and there's a lot of tree shading out there as well. So that didn't really make as much sense as these 3 particular sites. sites, excuse me. So in general, I think what we're looking at is about 600 to 800 kilowatts of solar power in this phase. Most likely the costs are going to come in to the tune of somewhere in the $2 to $3 million mark. We're still in the process now of honing in the design, figuring out what size those systems should be, and how much electricity they're ultimately going to save. But our anticipation is they'll save over $200,000 for the district moving forward in operating costs. So if you remember that first slide where we had a target of about $400,000, if you add the energy efficiency and the solar PV, we think we're going to get pretty close to that goal that we set out at the very beginning. And battery storage and charging stations, we're not quite as far along as we are on the solar side of things with those two measures, but we are working with our engineering team to, like I said, finalize the scopes, the use of the systems, the locations, sizes, et cetera. Next slide. So these next three slides are just a preliminary look at where these actual solar systems will be located. And if you see the light blue rectangles at the top of the screen between the tennis courts and the swimming pool there, that is our preliminary first choice for the location at the high school. There's obviously some solar that already exists at the high school that's already offsetting some of the load. But we think that we may be able to offset close to the remaining portion of the load at that site with those two rectangular systems that you see there at the top of the screen. If there's not enough physical space to offset as much energy as possible, and there's still potential to do a little bit more, then that rectangle in the lower right-hand corner would be the kind of the next location, the next logical feasible location to put some more solar panels. So at this point, we're not sure if it's going to take 3 rectangles or 2, but we're going to try to squeeze it in with 2, with the third spot kind of being the backup. Next slide. Thank you. Yep, those are the ones.
So, quick question: would those be other parking?
Oh, good question.
Would
Yeah.
it be over parking, or would it be not?
Good question. I should have mentioned that earlier. So the majority of these systems will be covered parking spots. I think there's 2 spots where we're looking at rooftop installation as backups, but the first choice is going to be covered parking, similar to some of the other systems that already exist. And one of the main drivers for that is the process of installing solar on rooftops and going through the DSA is cumbersome and challenging at the least. And so it's much more of a kind of a clean install and an easier process to go with the covered carports. It also provides a side benefit as well as far as protection from sun and rain and the elements.
Did you look at all at putting them near the hockey rink? I just think people might appreciate some shade at that hockey rink. I don't know if that's a possibility or not, but it's hot at that hockey rink.
Yeah, I honestly don't know the answer to that. I don't know where the hockey rink is located.
It's farther south. It's not on that slide there, but just curious.
Okay. No, I don't think that we did. I think what we did is from the beginning is we started with conversations with the staff, and we laid out several different preliminary locations that seemed to make the most sense when the solar experts, so to speak, walked the sites and kind of did the preliminary identification. And we started crossing off some of those locations based on different reasons, whether it be shading or traffic or proximity to other facilities or housing. And we basically landed at these spots. I don't recall that particular location, but if it were an interest of the district, it's not too late. We can certainly explore other locations if there's different sites that might be preferable. It doesn't take much to look at another site and see what the potential could be and whether it makes sense or not. Next slide. So this is that trifecta that I mentioned with the district office hatch and Pilarcitos. So the ideal location here would be those 2 large rectangles at the bottom of the screen, right out in front of Hatch Elementary. So that is an existing parking structure there. And even with the new construction that's going on in that location, we feel like those 2 systems will generate enough electricity to offset the majority, if not all, of the load between those 3 locations. If there's not enough space or not enough capacity to do that, then the backup location would be that other rectangle right next to the district office there in the upper left. So the plan moving forward is the two larger ones up front. And then if we needed to do a little bit more, we would look at that other smaller one in the upper left-hand corner. Next slide, please. And so Cunha is a little bit interesting because there already is an existing system there, but the system is, it's got a few years on it. I think it's at least 10 years old, and the technology of the solar panels has improved so much since 10 years ago that the capacity of these panels, the wattage, is much higher now for similar sized footprints. So we're going through an analysis right now of exploring whether it makes sense to replace those old 10 to 12 plus year panels with more efficient, higher capacity panels. And if that did work out, it would be, I think it would be a financially beneficial move because the infrastructure is already in place. You've already got the steel in place and the racking systems are in place. If we could simply swap those panels off with more efficient panels, we may be able to generate a lot more electricity in terms of what that particular site at Cunha is demanding. As we go through that analysis, we will also be looking at a backup location, which is that rooftop space there in the lower left where you see that blue square. So that's kind of the plan A, plan B approach at Cunha will be to first look into that green square and see what we can do with that and try to save some money. And depending on how that analysis goes, we may or may not need to go to that other location down in the lower left. And next and last slide. Oh, second to last slide. So these are just a couple pictures of what you may expect when I talk about this technology. Obviously, you've seen some of the existing systems you have there at your district. Not much different from what you see here on the picture on the left with the solar PV. There's different versions and different flavors of what it ultimately looks like when it's built, but they're all fairly similar. And then the two pictures, the battery storage, those are examples of different battery systems that have been installed at different school locations. And you can see they vary depending on the manufacturer and the technology, but that's just to give you a general idea of like physically what it looks like when we talk about a battery backup system for resiliency and load shedding. And then finally, on the right side is two different examples of EV charging stations. The one to the left is what we call a level 2 charging station. That's going to take a little bit longer. It's level 1 is the residential level that plugs into 120 volts. So level 2 is still, fast enough to give a charge to folks that are parking their cars there for an extended period of time. And then the charging station on the right is what we call a DC fast charger. And those are basically like the high power quick charge devices. And when you get to the DC fast charging stations, the price goes up pretty significantly. So what we're going to be doing is looking at the incentive through the Cal EV IP program. And if we can get a pretty lucrative incentive for the DC fast chargers, it may make financial sense for the district to try to get some of those. And if the incentive is not as great, then it may make more sense to go with the level 2 chargers. We're still in conversations with the district about quantities and locations of where these chargers might end up. But this is just to give you an idea of what the technology actually looks like. And at a minimum, what we will be doing is we'll be putting extra stubs into the solar panel systems so that even if the district doesn't purchase charging stations now, there will be the infrastructure in place. So if charging stations were purchased later, then you could basically plug them in the conduit and all the stubs would be in place, ready to go. And as you know, as Governor Newsom recently announced the phasing out of combustion engines by 2035, I believe it is, 2030, 2035. We think just the concept of EV charging stations is going to start to skyrocket over time. So we want to make sure that when we build the solar systems, we provide the proper infrastructure for the district to kind of keep up with the demand over time as electric cars hit the streets more and more. And last slide, please. So as far as next steps go, basically our task at hand is to finish this project development effort that we're working vigilantly with the district on. We need to finalize our scopes, costs, and savings for the technologies that I just reviewed. As we approach the end portion of this month, we'll be submitting applications to both Cal VIP and the SCHIP program to try to quantify what kind of quote free money we'll be able to pull into these projects from these outside sources. And once we get that all buttoned up to the point where it's a pretty firm looking project that's been approved by staff and kind of is aligned with the goals of the district, then we'll take that project back to the board as a project to be considered to move forward into the construction phase. And as far as timing goes, we're probably still a couple months away from finalizing everything. This next month and a half is going to be a pretty heavy lift on our side to firm up these numbers and spend some time with the district to get some final direction on what we want to do with charging stations and the final locations of the solar panels and the battery storage systems. So with that, I'll end the presentation and open it up if anyone has any questions.
Thanks, Gabe, for the work that you've done so far to just like investigate this. And I know that you've been working with the Center for Sustainable Energy and the Peninsula Clean Energy folks to figure out these grants, because we're trying to do this on the cheap, as cheaply as we could, knowing that the bond was written for energy conservation in part, and that it could save us operationally, and it would be good for our people. People could charge electric cars when they get them. It would be good for cost savings for our bottom line. And I know there's a lot of work, a lot of moving parts, but this is the right time to be investigating this work. So thanks for doing it.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's been a lot of fun working with the staff.
I'll just second that thank you and just say thanks. This is great work and exactly the kind of progress we should be making on our facilities and infrastructure. And think, it is heavy lifting now, as you've suggested, and for the staff as well, and for our budget, clearly from the bond side, but it is an investment in sustainability from all the three perspectives that Sean talks about all the time. So it's really great, and we're lucky to be in California where we have that kind of leadership at the state level too, where we know, as you said, that's the direction we're heading in as a state. So it's really great to be moving there with them.
So again, reiterate, thank you for all the work that's been done so far. Just a real quick question on other potential grant money from the state. I remember us talking about looking into, it was Prop 35 or something that also had some other energy efficiency or solar money. Is there any other opportunities for funding for some of this work from the state? And is that something you're looking into, Gabe, or Jesus? Is that something that you guys are looking into?
It's a combination of things. We have the Center for Sustainable Energy that is working in tandem with SciCircle, and then we're exploring all those funding possibilities. And at this moment, as Gabe was indicating, we're looking into upgrading the infrastructure and then get into what savings are going to be for the solar part of it.
So will we have an update on those other funding sources when we get the contract in December, for example, or?
Yeah, we will let you know what's available, what's feasible, what is not feasible.
Okay.
What kind of monies we qualify for.
Okay. And then just real quick, Gabe, I don't know if you already know, but what products are you using for panels and for batteries? Do you have that? Or that going to be later on in the next part of the contract negotiation?
Yeah, we don't have any particular products selected yet. The process that we usually follow is we'll size the systems based on the load and the demand by the district. And once we get those specifications in terms of the wattage for the panels that we're looking for, or the capacity of the battery storage, or the types of chargers, once we can kind of draw a box around the solution that we need, then we can go back and look at the different products that are available and try to choose the one that makes the most sense for the district in terms of what the district would like to receive, and also what makes the most sense financially.
So again, this was a big picture of sort of the work, to capture the work. I know that there's work underway currently on water conservation, electricity conservation, the work that we contracted Sizer Co with. And so thank you for doing that, Gabe, with your colleagues. Sizer Co has been here doing work on HVAC issues and other electrical issues in the past. So this is a big idea. This is a blue sky idea, but we think it's the right time. And we look forward to hearing back from you in the future per plan, hopefully.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you, Gabe.
You all have a good night.
Thank you very much. Sorry to keep you so long.
No worries. It's all good.
Thanks.
So there was no action on that item, and it was just a information item just to give you some progress.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much, Sean. Future events, October 14, we have a PTO Alliance meeting via Zoom, 6 p.m. And November 12th, is the next regular board meeting via Zoom. Of course, we may end up with a special board meeting, but before then, if requested. And at this point, we're not returning to closed session. Do I have a motion to adjourn our meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Lizette. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Freya. Aye, Freya.
Aye.
Mary Beth.
Aye.
Sophia.
Aye.
Lizette.
Aye.
Caroline.
Went to bed.
Yeah.
Motion passes. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in there, and appreciate everyone's hard work. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.